Okay, good evening. Welcome. The board has been in closed session since 6 o'clock for collective negotiation matters between the public body and its employees or their representatives, or deliberations concerning salary schedules for one or more classes of employees. And number 2, the appointment, employment, compensation, discipline, performance, or dismissal of specific employees of the public body. There are 7 members present, none absent, and could we rise for the pledge? I pledge allegiance to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all. This month we have recognition, which is one of our favorite things. First is Shining Star recognition. Thanks, Margaret.
Good evening. Just some background information. The Shining Star created, it is where peers nominate their peers for exemplary behavior. We have one Shining Star recognition, and I'm going to ask, is Roseanne Tanzer here? Please come up, stand in the front. Let's give her a hand. Now I get to say incredibly nice things that have been said. Oh, you have to stand in the middle. Oh, no. Can I just stay here? Oh, okay. Thanks. And Roseanne was nominated by Nancy Bensfield. And Nancy says, as a nurse at Sandburg, Roseanne wears many hats throughout the day. At any point, she can be called to an emergency that needs her immediate attention and care. She works to make sure the students' needs are met and that parents are contacted and made aware of situations as they occur. She provides information and updates to staff as needed. Now that in and of itself is a full-time job, but it goes on. A staff member approached Roseanne about a student's need for glasses. Roseanne started calling around the community and was able to find a business willing to supply the student with a pair of glasses. The student told the teacher, "Now I can see." Additionally, Roseanne has supported staff and students by sharing her role as a participant helping our troops. Several years ago, when her daughters were at York, she got involved in a program that provides resources requested by soldiers. Roseanne supports individuals as well as a whole group of recruits who ask for supplies and materials. She has shared this opportunity with students and staff at Sandburg, providing opportunities for Sandburg to become involved in supporting troops through community service projects. Whether it is a PE injury, an illness, an emergency situation, or community service, Roseanne is there providing top-notch care to students and staff. And that's from her peer. Thank you, Roseanne.
Thank you.
And I have a certificate for Roseanne, and I'm going to ask if you wouldn't mind going around and shaking all of our hands so we can thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you.
The next recognition is the American Volleyball Coaches Association recognition. Thank you.
Good evening. First, I would like to thank the school board, the administration, parents, and of course the players from the 2017 varsity team for being here tonight. I've been fortunate to have the opportunity to coach many great student athletes, including last year's group of kids. As a team, we accomplished a great deal last year, winning 2 tournament championships and a regional championship for the 3rd year in a row. But more importantly, these players excelled in the classroom and are therefore honored as an All-American academic team by the AVCA. I am very proud of all the teams I've coached that have won this award, this being our 7th year in a row. So thank you guys for all your hard work on the court and in the classroom.
This is such an incredible award. And I think the part that is most telling about this award is that it recognizes that scholarship is not separate from athleticism. They go hand in hand. So thank you for showing us that and showing how important extracurriculars offer balance to our group. Thank you, Mr. Dowdy. And I have to tell you, how many years in a row is this now?
7.
7 years in a row. A sidebar, I was bragging about the volleyball team to my daughters who graduated from York a couple years ago. And they played sports and they said, there are many groups out there who have that. And I said, well, we've only recognized volleyball for 7 years. So if there are other groups out there that have this outstanding, if there's other coaches, teams, other groups out there who have this outstanding record, I say please let us know so the board can recognize you too. But right now it's been volleyball for 7 years.
Let's hope it lasts. It continues.
Right. Yeah, speaking of the 7 years, Coach Dowdy came his first time 7 years ago. And I thought, all right, there's 52,000 high school boys that play volleyball. 21 or 20-ish teams win. So they had a good year. They found a bunch of tall athletes that play volleyball that studied well and were smart kids. But after 7 years in a row, you got to think there's something else going on, and I doubt we're screening for grade point average when we recruit the team. So clearly, from their win-loss record, we have the best athletes we have at York. And York is a very special place, and it's people like Coach Dowdy, Coach Fisher, that make it that special place. I think you guys are aware of that. So congratulations to you. You've had a great season, a great year, and clearly your focus is on the right thing. And to Coach Dowdy, Coach Fisher, congratulations.
Thank you.
And let me just read the proclamation before there's any applause. Let's see how I do here in my reading. Whereas for the 7th year in a row, York Community High School boys volleyball team was honored as an All-American academic team by the American Volleyball Coaches Association. And whereas since the 2000-2001 season, the number of recipients have increased every single year but 2, while amassing a 542-team increase over the span of the last decade. And since the award's inception in 1993, the amount of award winners has increased from 71 to its current number of 835. And whereas the AVCA honors teams with at least a 3.3 cumulative GPA on a 4.0 scale, and the York varsity team, which maintained a 3.695 cumulative GPA during the 2016-17 school year, is one of only 21 boys teams in the nation to receive the award, and only one of 6 in Illinois. And whereas this accomplishment brings pride and prestige to York Community High School, Elmhurst District 205, the families of these students, and our community. Now therefore, be it resolved that the Board of Education and Administration of Elmhurst Community Unit School District 205 express deep appreciation and congratulations to Coach Ken Dowdy and Assistant Coach Brian Fisher, To team captains Rio Diaz, John Nosek, and Michael Pinnell, and team members Jack Crowley, Michael Deaton, Michael Dermish, Jack Gohl, Evan Haug, Matt Howlett, Zachary Hugert, Samuel Jordan Wood, Dylan Kalchik, Adrian, help me out,
Kozinski.
Kozinski, thank you, Raymond Lessis, Ryan Shaner, and John Sopko for their outstanding performance during this 2016 season. Congratulations, guys.
All right, thank you.
And I'll give you the excess of these. We'll see you next year, Coach Dowdy.
Okay, we have board or public comments next, and we ask that you speak for up to 3 minutes. And at this time, we don't respond to public comments, but we do follow up at a later time. So first on our list is Paul Garino.
And I was at the last one after about 2 hours of comments, and you told me that you were going to shut off the microphone if I kept on talking. I've never met a microphone I didn't like. See how short it's going to be? I began teaching in 1964. And being a newbie, I had my classroom set up absolutely perfect. Principal came in the day before, said, "Mr. Garino, it's wonderful. There's only one correction we have to make." And Sister Ann Thomas took the eraser and erased the entire front of the room with all of my rules. And in her best penmanship, the best Palmer penmanship I've ever seen, she wrote one word, T-H-I-N-K. And she said, "Mr. Garino, if your students think before they speak and act, they'll never be in trouble. And if you think before you speak and act when you're disciplining them, you won't be in Father's office." And I followed that, but not when I was in the public schools. I thought that this place would be packed with unhappy taxpayers. I'm very disappointed that it's not. As far as I'm concerned, what happened at York was a disgrace because of the way it was handled. They could have done the same thing with 3 pictures and got nothing but wonderful acclaim, and we would not have been on various political forums on AOL. They could have shown the American flag being taken down and stepped on at Corregidor by Japanese troops. They could have shown the soldiers raising the flag at Iwo Jima. And then from my generation, they could have shown kids burning the flag, protesting the war. Nobody broke a law putting that flag on the ground. It's flag code, not flag law. I have a very strong feeling toward Corregidor and Bataan. My father-in-law was in the National Guard, but he wasn't sent with the engineering battalion from Maywood to Corregidor. He lost a great many friends. He lost a great many friends. And a few miles from here, there is a street called Bataan Drive. So I recommend that those teachers and that librarian contact the VFW in Maywood and Broadview and Westchester and see if there are any veterans still alive. Thank you.
Thank you. Tanya Cummings.
My name is Tanya Cummins, and I'm a Conrad Fisher parent. I'm dismayed to find myself here again for the second board meeting in a row. We appreciate the movement we've seen thus far on our concerns, and we're willing to wait to see more progress. However, when I saw the agenda and Dr. Moyer's memo, I could not in good conscience avoid returning. The response from the district is rampant with blatant fact twisting. After speaking here on September 26th, we received a group email from the superintendent, and while I was grateful for acknowledgement, I was troubled but not surprised that we were not extended the same invitation to meet and discuss our issues as a Jackson parent was offered. It's hard to find a justification for that other than it's exactly the type of inequitable treatment that we've learned to expect, or perhaps our palpable anger gave the impression that we're not capable of civil discourse. I can assure you, we are. You can imagine how insulting it was, but not surprising. It felt to find out that mere moments after we spoke, the board approved an $8,000 donation by Sandburg PTA for furniture for collaborative learning spaces. I'm not sure how that's equitable with the area rugs our teachers buy with their own money so our kids can sit on the floor and collaborate, but maybe I'm just one of those troublemaker parents that's resistant to change. The repairs to our playground that Dr. Moyer references in his memo must have been quite minimal, as there's no obvious visual difference, and I've thoroughly walked the playground twice recently. But it's possible I missed something since I did it alone, as not one of you took me up on my offer to check it out for yourself. What's missing in the explanation of the Title I funds is the fact that our school needs materials in 2 languages, and that state ELL law State ELL law has specific student-to-staff ratio requirements which mandate additional staff. This is not some gracious gift to us, it's the district complying with the law. But that's not noted anywhere on the graph you'll be seeing, because that wouldn't help promote the inaccurate narrative. To imply that the district compensates our students in any way, academic or otherwise, to offset large donations at other schools is misleading. The statement that the district has prioritized to create equity is nonsense, because if that's the case, where's our playground? Our new furniture, picnic tables, fancy water fountains, or all the other multitudes of items I've seen donated? Because all the Title I money in the country can't be used for those purposes. I've not been to every other elementary school, but I've been told that most have ceiling-mounted projectors and smartboards. I know that other schools have Chromebook carts because I've seen the board accept donation after donation for them. To use those items as examples of the district creating equity at Fisher is misleading. Our students do not receive anything from this district that could equalize the enormous donations for additional curriculum materials, which give other schools a leg up academically. The mere mention of TIF 4 funds is as laughable as it is disingenuous. Are those not the same funds being held hostage in an intergovernmental grudge fest? The same ones that are supposed to be earmarked specifically for Fisher and Fisher and Churchville and available for early release? Or are they the ones that are causing the budget deficit despite no capital improvements being completed for the North Side schools? The one thing I know for certain is that they're not currently available, so mentioning them rings hollow. I know when we spoke at the last meeting, it wasn't the first time you heard about equity concerns, because I'm in possession of an email that was sent to the entire board in May of 2016 by a parent from a school other than Fisher expressing the same concerns, but nothing's been done in 17 months. We're thankful for the mulch that was delivered to Fisher today. Interesting timing. I wish I could be more gracious, but I once went again and measured the depth. I chose 5 random spots, and it was anywhere from 3/4 of an inch to 2 inches at the most, with most areas hovering around an inch. This is a far cry from the Consumer Product Safety Commission Guide for Playgrounds, which is one of 2 standards that the courts have used as a guide, and who recommends a depth of 9 inches. Please research the claims made in Dr. Moyer's memo, and give all district students the same opportunities, because as I hear, all means all.
Thanks. Next is Michael Crumry.
Michael Cremery. I'm not sure if the cameraman will be able to pan the board if they shake their heads while I'm talking. Michael Cremery, I'm a grandson of a World War II veteran, son-in-law of a Marine veteran from Korea, nephew of six uncles. 5 served in the military, while uncle number 6 is legally blind. Multiple examples of the ignorance concerning correct etiquette and display of the U.S. flag by District 205. In the midst of disrespectfully placing the U.S. flag on the floor of the library at York High School, the flag was incorrectly placed with the Union stars at the top right. The Union stars should always be at the top left. Again, to emphasize the gentleman that spoke earlier, it is flag code, not necessarily law. Item number 2, since last year at York, the U.S. flag displayed by the West Academic Building continues to be incorrectly displayed at night without proper illumination. There must be a dedicated light for the U.S. flag, else the flag should only be displayed from sunrise to sunset. That was brought to the attention of administration at York High School last year. Over the past 2 to 3 weeks, the U.S. flag at Emerson School has been displayed at night without appropriate illumination. Unfortunately, tonight, that same U.S. flag remains displayed in darkness. Even the Elmhurst Independent newspaper office on West Avenue continues to display a U.S. flag in darkness. Yes, they have a dedicated light for the flag, but the light bulb's been burnt out for quite some time, or the automated light switch is broken. The Independent does have an operational light dedicated to their advertisement sign, but not the U.S. flag. In the Elmhurst Independent newspaper dated October 5th, appeared to present the topic as news reporting story, but it might have better been served within the Viewpoints opinion section. Excerpts from the Elmhurst Independent dated October 5th. But according to a release issued later in the day by the school district 205 administration, the entire sophomore class was exploring First Amendment rights as part of a day-long interdisciplinary forum. That's incorrect. The statement released on Tuesday, September 26th, was from York High School principal Aaron DeLuga. The statement released by District 205 was done on Thursday, September 28th, 2 days later. Another excerpt from the alleged news reporting. Bringing the issue to the present day, the timing was rather poor since much of the country was still embroiled in President Donald Trump's feud with the NFL players who are, quote, taking a knee, close quote, instead of standing for the national anthem. Had that not been at the top of everyone's mind, the action may not have been such a disruption. Is that factual news reporting or something else? In closing, are the parents here tonight aware of District 205's policy manual, section 6210, regarding instructional materials? R-rated movies are being shown in the classroom to your 14, 15, 16-year-old children without your knowledge or approval. R-rated means restricted. Under 17 requires accompanying parent or adult guardian. Simply stated, District 205 gets to decide what's appropriate for your children to watch in the classroom.
Okay, thanks for the comments. We will respond. And we'll move on to reports and presentations. High school curriculum and facilities.
Okay, well, they're getting organized. I'll just reiterate a couple highlights from the memo that's in your packet. We're not asking for board action tonight. We will ask for board action on a couple curriculum changes related to course additions due to ACP courses being added, and also an honors course, I believe, at the junior level at the next board meeting, so that we can get the course selection process and the course catalog printed and that whole process started. But what we're doing tonight is last spring, most of you, I believe, all of you maybe, were able to visit the high school and see some spaces that we're thinking about for renovation to launch some of the career pathways. And tonight, we're going to talk about two of them, one the manufacturing pathway and the other the business pathway. And we have done a lot of preliminary work with outside organizations to look at funding and to internally start to figure out how we would plan the curriculum sequencing. There's been site visits and other things like that. A lot of that will come out tonight. We want to share with you what the costs of those spaces would be. Those would be worked into our annual maintenance budget this summer and the following summer, and so they wouldn't be additional. They would not be additional funds. They would be included in our planning for the work that we do each of the next 2 years to support these pathways. And so we basically need the blessing of the board to continue to move forward with the planning process so that we know that we can include both the facility and curricular planning in our future work. Any approvals of different things would be part of the normal bidding process or part of the normal presentations we make at different times of the year about curriculum and course approvals. There won't really be too many course approvals related to this. Most of it will be just reorganizing existing courses to support kind of an articulated curriculum. And so they'll explain a lot more about that when they get into their presentation.
Good evening. I'm very, it's where I am. So I can't make it any taller. I wouldn't do that to you anyway. I consider myself very fortunate to have come to a district and to York High School, seeing so many wonderful capstone experiences that already exist for students to transition them from high school to college and careers. Right now there are 2 more of these capstone experiences that are under development, and that's what we're here to talk to you a little bit about tonight. The entire process of setting up pathways, career pathways, is simply the vertical articulation of curriculum, starting with very general courses and then building up to very rich, specific experiences that prepare students for careers based on their interest. Tonight what we want to do is talk a little bit about the development of these pathways at York, talk about some of the career pathways that are under development, and then also talk a little bit about these 2 specific pathways and the next steps that have to be undertaken in order to get them launched in 2019. So I'm going to let Erin talk a little bit more about those pathways.
So before she does that, I got some information this morning that I was not able to include into your packet. And we got the cost estimates for the incubator lab. They'll reiterate that later in the presentation, but it was not in my packet because I didn't have the information until this morning. That dollar amount for the incubator space is $216,000.
Thank you, Dave. So last year I visited and talked about pathways overarching and what the concepts are behind why we do this for kids, but I want to reiterate a few things that I talked about last year with the board, which is that we must engage students in rigorous, relevant experiences. I often say we need to meet each child where they are and help them grow. And it's a mantra that most that are working with me and have worked with me are familiar with. I really firmly believe in that, and I believe that these pathway experiences can give students those opportunities. It also prepares them for a global economy beyond high school and gives them hands-on experiences in high school, including internships, mentoring, micro-internships, etc., and provides certification opportunities as much as possible while they're here so that they can be competitive outside of high school. So in the guidance department, the question of what do you need to do to graduate high school with all your credits is shifting in the most extraordinary way. And instead, the questions become, what do you want to do with the rest of your life? And what are you passionate about? And then the counseling staff, teachers, administration really work to try to help the student maximize his or her potential. What is the power of pathways and capstone courses? It really does foster diagonal movement, interdisciplinary collaboration. It gets kids out into industry and industry to work with our kids. It works in correlation with advanced placement courses. It's certainly capacity building and creates very specific programs of study for students. And it provides them with mentoring, which is professional, internships, which is technical, and living wage career opportunities, which is occupational. And these are the career pathways that are currently in place at York or emerging. And so these two specific pathways we're focusing on tonight because the other ones have become further along, other than our health careers. I want to work towards a CNA certification for that program over time, but we are working on partnerships with Elmhurst College and College of DuPage right now, and even toying with the idea of how would we bring something like that in. It's a bit more of an arduous undertaking. So manufacturing works really well with engineering and the interdisciplinary components of both supporting one another. The incubator actually marries marketing, finance, and business together. So we have those courses well underway, and that would be a senior level course that would then be the capstone for those two pathways. Obviously, La Brigade, up and running, YTV for broadcast journalism, up and running, and our business and courses are also humming along. So the manufacturing pathway sequence would be in 9th grade, manufacturing technology, 10th grade, advanced manufacturing technology, 11th grade, integrated manufacturing technology, and computer numerical control technology. The staff and CTE is working on hammering all of this out now. And then of course the capstone would be the manufacturing technology with certification. And the why of manufacturing really is that it provides students with hands-on training on industry credentialed machines, mills and lathes. We've vetted out a lot of different companies and industries over the last year and a half and really worked on creating strong partnerships. It provides them with real-world training that includes problem solving, critical thinking, and teamwork, and leads to post-secondary opportunities in college or careers. So far, we have TMA, the Tooling Manufacturing Association, SME, Society of Manufacturing Engineers, EBO, Elmhurst Business Owners, PCA, they're all acronyms. They just like to throw those around in manufacturing. Packaging Corporation of America, Creative Works, which is a packaging solutions company, and one of our students' fathers works as a CEO there, and TCD, the Technology Center of DuPage. One quick story I'll share is that I was in CTE courses last week, and they were working with PCA, and they are actually engineering, designing, and cutting out cardboard award boxes for guest speakers at York. And when the kids were working on the graphics of this, they were so excited to show me what they've been learning and to get into PCA to do some more work. So Mark's going to cover some of the costs that, that Dr. Moyer was talking about earlier.
It's estimated that it'll be about $130,000 in order to renovate the existing CTE space into the manufacturing lab that we envision. This project would take place in the summer of 2018. So largely involves some construction, some renovation of wall space, simply creating doors that are large enough to get equipment into the building. A 36-inch door won't cover some of this. Open up the computer lab into the manufacturing space, and then also all the corresponding electrical work that needs to be done. Equipment would then be added over the course of the 18-19 school year. Start off with a couple pieces of equipment. We're also going to be actively soliciting donations. We have some folks that are willing to help. We'll be looking at Perkins grant money, and then some other of it will may just come out of L&T, like we would equip any other science or career and tech lab. The course curriculum itself will be developed over the 18-19 school year once we get the equipment in place and have the teachers have the opportunity to kind of work through it for a little bit. And then in the fall of 2019, we'll be able to get those capstone courses up and off the ground.
And just one other thing about the equipment, it's very large equipment. We'll need a number of the machines in the lab. So for next year, we only need to get in a couple, which we're going to be able to do with grants. And so we're going to just continually work with TMA and SME, who have been fantastic partners to area high schools in helping them with funding. But that'll be a definite consideration as we're moving forward with the curriculum. So the second pathway, the business incubator, really is quite exciting. I was on the groundwork of work done at Wheeling High School when I was the assistant principal of instruction there to create a business incubator lab for our students. At that point, I visited Barrington, which is the model school, Barrington High School, and then I just recently visited there 2 weeks ago again. So the incubator really gives kids like that hands-on experience to create, innovate, to make mistakes, to take risks, to fail in order to succeed over and over and over again. It really inspires students and teachers to turn ideas into reality. And I think that that's pretty extraordinary when you're asking students to go out and change the world, and you want to mean it and not just say it. So the incubator really works to create, to innovate, and is a capstone for the business pathway. If you've seen Shark Tank, it's the easiest way to think of an incubator lab. The students work with mentors in the community that then help them refine products that they create in groups, and then they go through the whole school year refining those products and pitching them. I am fortunate enough to sit with Elmhurst business owners now, their board, so they've invited me on this year. Exciting. And they are very interested in working to partner with us on this. The high school program elements is through Incubator EDU. It's easily Googled and looked up. It's the program that's used by all high schools that have it, and I'll show you a list of high schools that do in Illinois, and it's astounding how many do. It's a full-year curriculum, including lesson plans, exercises, and assessment structures, access to materials via online learning management systems, professional development for educators, completely mapped out, which is also nice. It has a coach-mentor recruiting framework. It's quarterly webinars to support classroom teachers and facility designs and resources, along with architecture, furniture, so on and so forth, ideas of how to make the space innovative. These are really pretty interesting percentages. 94% of the millennial generation believe that entrepreneurship education is important. 62 have not been offered a class, and 62% of respondents who took a class did not feel it was adequate. 72% of high schoolers want to be entrepreneurs. In fact, they do worry about the economy. So I think that's really something to put in our back pockets as we're thinking about the why. So here are some schools, and I know that this might be tough to read, and I certainly will not read all of them to you, but in the area, you can see Glenbard East is there, Deerfield High School, Naperville, North, Central, Wheaton North, Wheaton Warrenville, in our area. District 211, those 5 high schools. District 214, all 6 comprehensive high schools. They're looking at putting one together for their alternative school as well. District 225, both schools. CPS, Michelle Clark Prep and Lane Tech. That's pretty extraordinary. And then private schools, Marist, St. Pat's, Carmel, and Marion Central. Because I started my own teaching career in a private school for the first 4 years of teaching, the fact that they've pulled people together in their communities in those private schools to fund something like this is extraordinary, because it's not easy to do in the private sector. Our incubator partners, Incubator EDU, as I mentioned before, Elmhurst business owners are extremely interested, and Elmhurst Foundation is also looking to help us with this. And then I am going to turn it over to Mark to talk about the costs.
Well, Dr. Moyer gave was the spoiler alert on the overall cost of the program. We're looking at approximately $216,000 overall in facility renovations in order to make the incubator space come to life as a collaborative space, somewhere where flexible furniture, the technology needs to be addressed, areas for students to collaborate in small groups to work with their mentors. It's going to be something that's going to be spread out. We're looking now almost 2 years down the line to be the summer of 2019. We can certainly look at adjusting that cost, but this will be done in-house in order to save money. We're by spacing out the work in the manufacturing lab, doing that this summer, and then doing the business incubator space in the summer of 19. We're able to spread those costs out and do it in-house with the staff that we currently have, reducing the cost to the district. Again, we're very fortunate. I think we're very fortunate to have staff at York High School that are willing to go and develop this curriculum to keep our programs on the cutting edge and make sure that the students of District 205 have access to programs which are going to directly prepare them for the next level, whether they go straight into the workforce or they pursue a college degree in any one of these fields. At this point in time, we'd be willing to entertain any questions from the board.
Thank you very much for that presentation. I just have one quick technical question. You mentioned for the manufacturing that it would start, the cost would be incurred the 2018 school year and the curriculum would start 2019. Can you talk about what would occur for the incubator? When the curriculum would actually start?
That would probably start in the fall of 2019. We get that up and running.
Oh, so there's no
There wouldn't be a
buildup?
delay in the incubator, no.
Okay.
Both programs would get started that year.
The delay for the other implementation is the training on the machines.
Can we go back a couple slides? There was a slide back that said that some percentage of kids were not, there we are. I thought they were the same number. 62% have not been offered a class, and 62% of the respondents who took a class did not feel it was adequate. What are we doing differently for those 62% who didn't feel the class they took in high school was adequate?
That's really why this incubator concept is so important. So when you look on Incubator EDU, the website that has these stats published for the high schools that were listed have all put the incubator labs into their schools, have said that if the capstone wasn't the incubator concept, it was a different potential business course or elevated scoped and sequenced skill level business course that may be very traditional in the way it's delivered. The students still didn't see the value in it. So the experience that, just to give a personal example, the experience that I had with 4 young men, and I might have mentioned this to individuals before on the board, at Wheeling when they were creating their minimally viable product and pitching it, we had a group of kids that actually got, it's called Snap Clips. You can Google it. It's a product that exists out there in the world. Shark Tank tried to pick them up. They said no because they didn't want to give up a percentage of their fabulous income that they perceived themselves making, but they actually did make quite a bit of money, and they worked with business partners. And one of the students was a student that I worked with as the API there over instruction that really struggled the entire way through high school. And the light bulb turned on because of this class. He got straight A's senior year. He came to me at the end of his upon graduation and said, had he not had this experience, he's not sure he would have seen value in his high school career. And that's unfortunate, and we have to change it. And so that is why, conceptually, I started those conversations here.
We'll bring it back to what we talked about, the rigor relevance framework. We talk about not only doing things that are programs that are rigorous academically, but also ask students to apply things to real life, to real world, unpredictable situations. This is a great application of that concept. And what you see then is greater engagement and greater satisfaction with school.
Yeah.
Just a question. I mean, in the manufacturing side, I think a lot of the research shows, and a lot of the companies out there that are hiring people are talking about something beyond high school. So typically some kind of certificate program or something at the next level, which is a great thing for kids to be able to earn a great living. I mean, I think a great middle class living with this kind of thing. And I think it's fantastic you guys are doing this to get them started. But I guess my question comes around to articulation into like COD or some of these other programs. I mean, the connection with that to make sure that what we're giving them isn't the end of it. It's a kickstart to get them going, but for the most part, they're going to have to do more. And so are we connecting to that?
Absolutely. So with the industry partners that we've worked on with manufacturing so far, either the CEOs or the owners have said, here are the things that I am willing to offer students in my company based on what they do in high school leading outside of it. A lot of that is entry-level positions while they're paying for College of DuPage in full. I mean, unbelievable. And these things, we need to make our students and our families aware of it. I am working on how that's looking with Mark in print so that we can start getting some of those experiences off the ground for students, and so that parents understand not only the cost benefit, but also that it's really what that student is passionate about. There are also, conversations with industry partners of moving students into management and providing them business classes that are beyond just what they would be doing for manufacturing, saying if you want to be a business manager for this company, PCA is one of them, and so is Creative Works. Those opportunities we're really trying to nail down to make those dreams a reality for the kids that are interested. And we want them to know that it is a launching pad. It doesn't have to be a stop point. It's a launching pad to 2 and 4 year college degrees if that's what they desire. But if not, that there's an incredible living waiting outside for them to make and to earn based on their hands-on experiences. The machines, that's why the machines are so important in the labs and the training for a year, because the teachers and the students really need to have the ability I mean, these are industry standard level machines, mills, lathes, so on and so forth, that the kids really need to have some time to work with.
And I guess, maybe I didn't ask that totally correctly the way what I was meaning, but is like our Indiana University relationship where we have dual credit courses. I mean, is there an opportunity to integrate our curriculum to the point where for the kids that get advanced in this to go into the next level with credit from, whether it's COD or whether it's other places like that? Have we explored any of that?
We are currently exploring that now, and then certifications as well.
Thank you. My question is more along the lines of giving everyone a sense of what does this look like? Because what we're familiar with is the kids, have a course curriculum and they sign up for their classes each semester for 4 years. So can you kind of, give us a sense of how does this overlay or be integrated with it?
Do you want to go ahead, Mark? Go ahead.
Again, I want you to imagine almost like a college experience where you start off with some very general courses and you work your way into your major. It'd be very, very similar. A student that's let's say, for example, on that business pathway, this business incubator would be their sort of senior project, if you will. But along the way, they would take other courses that are currently in the business department. So this is just another development kind of pushing students a little further along before they leave York. So
I think what you're trying to ask, I think, of the same question. When you're in 8th grade and you have to sign up for your classes, in January, how do you get on that pathway of, okay, 9th grade, I'm going to take manufacturing. How do you even know to start the pathway?
So we literally just started those conversations 4 weeks ago for the current 8th grade class, and how our student services department can start communicating and collaborating with the administrations in the middle schools to be able to start the conversation early and to have the students express interest in their course selection sheets when they're coming in, to say there's just like recreating what that looks like and asking what those interests and passions are. Now, obviously, being totally transparent and touting that I'm not naive in the sense that a lot of kids at that age don't know necessarily what they want to do, but if we can get them to at least verbalize interests, we can start massaging a pathway for them, at least in hopes that they might find something that piques their interest.
They can start exploring.
Yep.
I mean, that's the whole purpose of the high school.
Right.
And so I guess my question was a little bit different, but that's a good point too, was just to give people a sense of, so the kids take a marketing class or a business class or an advertising class. It sounds as though some of the teachers in some of those courses are going to be interconnected with the incubator concept and the hands-on of the content that they're learning in those classes. And I guess that's what I didn't want to make that assumption. I think it's important for us to know that's kind of how it's being integrated.
Yes.
Okay. The second question, the last question I have is if you go on to Incubator EDU, it actually talks about high school, middle school, and elementary school. Maybe not now, but at some point, I'm really curious about that. We're just getting started here, but,
Sure.
I'm thinking about with the middle school, what we're doing at the middle school. Are we launching into something like that? You know what I mean? Like integrating it throughout our whole curriculum in the district at some point?
Sure. Go ahead, Dave.
I'll speak to that a little bit. That's partially where Project Lead the Way comes in. That's also with the Next Generation Science Standards. And as we look at the work that they're doing with curriculum and the enrichment opportunities through the acceleration period is a third example where we're trying to pull all this together in a K-12 kind of concept. We think that there will be more opportunities starting at the elementary school for STEM-related types of experiences and project-based learning that will run through the middle school and into the high school. So they won't be thinking about these things for the first time, once this becomes a little bit more evolved.
Yeah, so thank you for connecting all the pieces, the STEM, the Project Lead the Way, the pathways, that they're not separated at some point. It's threading throughout the district. Okay, thank you.
So first, I think this is great, but I do have a question. So as you create this and get this going, like, how do you see it being maintained? Because it feels like you'll need people in the community, and, you need teachers who are going to work on if you're different business teachers. So how do you, who's going to maintain it, I guess?
That's an excellent question. I think in terms of the mentors that are part of the business incubator, and then the council that's part of manufacturing, the idea will be to grow the level of support in the community, and even close there and outside of the community. So from that standpoint, at Wheeling, their councils people would shift in and out once they heard of programming and wanted to be part of it. And that's for financial support and also for mentoring for the students. From an FTE standpoint, breathing life into these capstones and making sure that they stay viable is crucial. And that means that the whole school has to be on board conceptually with it, from a teaching standpoint and administrative standpoint. Also, from a logistics standpoint, taking those lower level classes that build up to the capstone and allowing them to actually have their classes in that facility. So if you're talking about a capstone running with 2 sections and it's in infancy, in year 1, then you would run other business classes that feed into that to hook and engage kids in at a younger age. And I want to do that. I see that. And same with the manufacturing lab. I hope that answers your question, Kara.
So this is going to be for Chris. When you guys come back, I'd be really curious about how this fits into our CapEx budget, given that it's tight already and we're still missing the money from the TIF funds. I would propose that we could name the incubator the TIF 1 funds. We could name the incubator after certain city officials if they were to honor their obligation.
Thank you.
Thank you.
School improvement plans is next. Mary?
Yes, they did leave it. Good evening. I'm very pleased to be here tonight to talk about our school improvement plans and process for the 2017-18 school year. Much more excited than I was last year at this time when I presented the same thing. I am just so very pleased and proud of our schools with the work that they've done, really developing some robust improvement plans that really will guide their work throughout the year. So your learning targets for tonight. Tonight I'm not asking you for a decision or to approve anything. It's really informational for you to gain a sense of what our schools are doing for school improvement and what type of process they're using. So why change? The plans look very different than they have in years past, and that really comes as a result of diving in and looking at previous school improvement plans and how they were used. And the reality is that previously plans were created, sometimes by just the principal, other times by school leadership teams, but once they were created, they really kind of sat off to the side and it was sort of a check, okay, I got my school improvement done for the year. And that really doesn't serve anyone well. That's just completing a task. The real purpose of school improvement plans is to drive all of your efforts in the school. It should drive your decision making, it should drive your professional learning. When you're creating your budget for the year with the funds allocated to your building, you should see where that falls in line with your school improvement plan because those are your building priorities. So as I reviewed previous plans and processes that were used, it was clear to me that we needed some more meaningful data analysis.
some very specific action plans. And then another real critical part is not only should it be a living document that serves to guide your work, it also should be something that your whole staff takes part in, as well as something your parent community and the community at large is familiar with. So that was another piece I wanted to make sure that we layered in. So we are using a process out of the Harvard Graduate School of Education. It's called the DataWise process. Similar to business fields and other fields of work, it's a continuous improvement cycle. So it's not, here's our goal, here are the things we did, and we're all done. You can see on this graphic that it really looks for you to get the plan in place, monitor the plan, review the data, and then either make adjustments or continue. So some of the components that look different in our plans this year, one is data analysis. So we really expect our schools to use multiple sources of data. They may be using MAP data, they may be using PARC, SAT data for our high schools. This year, many of our elementary schools incorporated Fontes and Pinnell data, which you'll learn more about in Mary Ann's presentation. So really your plan should not rest on one source of data. The plans should include a narrative that's not just a listing of data points, but an interpretation and an analysis and what that means for the school. If there are achievement gaps, schools should be identifying those so that they really know where they need to target some work. And what I'm most proud of is that what I saw in many of the plans was a willingness by school leadership teams to confront the brutal facts. So when we talk about culture goals in some of the data our schools collected, schools were very honest about where they were. They were honest in their analysis about their gaps, and that's the first step to closing gaps, is to really give a thorough and honest assessment of where you're performing. Another component that looks a little different this year would be in the way the goals are written. They're written as a theory of action, so that's really an if-then statement. So it identifies what are the specific strategies a school is going to use to improve. So for example, if all schools incorporate learning activities that represent quadrant D work, so if we think about our rigor and relevance framework, then student engagement will increase. So in this example, the school is going to focus on ensuring that in classrooms, teachers are incorporating work and learning activities that would be representing quadrant D. Another piece that's unique this year is something I stole from a previous district in a school improvement process that we used. And that is asking the leadership team or the group that's creating the school improvement plan to think and talk about, so let's say our goal is fully implemented and realized, what will that look like? How could someone from outside of our school community walk in and know that this is in place? And that's a really important step because it forces people to maybe look at some quantitative measures. So for example, our achievement gap will have decreased by 10%. You'll see things like all classroom teachers will use the workshop model of reading for reading instruction. Well, that makes it very easy for the school leadership team to say, we've met this goal or we haven't. Because if all classroom teachers are supposed to be doing it and they're not, then that goal is not attained. So that section of the school improvement plan really allows teams to be very descriptive in what they would expect to see in their building. Another component is an action plan, and in this case, our action plans are very specific with a point person who's responsible for ensuring that part is done, when they expect to complete it, and those, some of them may be short in terms of the action steps now, but it's something with their continued analysis and review of the plan that will get added to as the year goes on. So some of the commonalities that are required by all of our schools, one of those is that the school team who creates and monitors the SIP plan should be comprised of administrators, either the instructional coach or all coaches, and staff that represent a range of grade levels and content areas. Our leaders are expected to meet with their teams at least once a month for 45 minutes. We found that many teams were only meeting for 20 to 30 minutes a month, which is not enough time to continue to monitor and analyze data. Our schools all have 3 goals because one goal was required to be on culture for all of our schools. That's been an area of emphasis for us across the district this year, is improving the health of our school culture and district culture, and so we wanted that to be reflected in our school improvement plans. Last month, our administrators took part in a peer review. They'll do 2 of those this year. So that looks like our principals and assistant principals pairing up with another leader and going through with a data protocol, going through the components of the plan and giving their peer critical feedback on the plan. Next, after tonight, then our administrators will schedule a presentation of the SIP plan to their staff as well as to their parent community, and then the plan will be posted in an easy-to-find place on their school website. So just a little bit about the school culture goals, since that is something new. The reason behind that, as I shared, we want to improve the health of our culture in each school in the district. We also want to increase collaboration in the building, foster trust among all staff, and that's so that we can have the most effective learning environment for our student. One of the things we've worked on with our leaders this year is understanding the difference between culture and climate, because many times those words are used interchangeably. So we often talk about the climate in your school is the difference between the way it feels on a Monday and the way it feels on a Friday. The way it would feel if all staff suddenly got an email from Dr. Moyer saying that he's canceled school for tomorrow. That's climate. And that can be fairly easy to tackle, and there are some surface level things you can do for a healthy climate, and those are good to do. But changing culture is something that takes 3 to 5 years, and that can be really difficult for even leaders to accept, much less everyone in the organization. Culture is the why we are doing things. It's the way we do business around here. That is the culture. So our schools are really trying to dive deeper and tackle those things. And so now I'm going to invite Jen Barnaby, who is our principal at Lincoln Elementary School, and members of her school leadership team, who are going to bring this to life a little bit through details of their own school plan.
So while we wait for them to get going here, I just want to add, since I got here, I think at various points in time, you've heard me talk about the fact that we need to strengthen our school improvement planning process, and that I wasn't satisfied with where we were at. We made some baby steps here and there, but for various reasons, we just never really got to where I felt it needed to be. And I'm really excited this year that we are finally able to present to you what I consider to be some quality school improvement plans the way they should be. And this is a really good example tonight from Lincoln.
So it's an honor to be here tonight to present our Lincoln School Improvement Plan on behalf of our colleagues who helped develop each of the components. We have Shelley Rzuski, one of our reading specialists, Becky D'Angelo, our instructional coach, Katie McDonough, one of our second grade teachers, and Christina Pedraza, our assistant principal. As Dr. Henderson discussed the components of each building school improvement plan, Dr. Pedraza will highlight the work of our team and how it all came together.
Thanks. So I just wanted to start by echoing. Do you want to move any of this? Oh, yeah, thank you. So I just wanted to start by echoing the importance that we really felt in making sure that the school improvement plan wasn't just this document that had been created and was this elusive thing to our staff members that really didn't have any meaning or any impact on their practice. We wanted this to be a living, breathing document that we really had all staff buy-in. And so for us, that started with looking at our data. We looked at our MAP data in both reading and also in math. At the time that we started creating this, we did not have our Fountas and Pinnell data yet when we had first started, but we eventually started looking at that as a staff as well. We also looked at our culture survey results, and so that kind of grounded us in where are we at right now, which would allow us to then start talking about where do we want students to be. And you will hear Jen kind of fill in a little bit more of those pieces as to where we went with that, but I'm just going to fill you in a little bit on our process as to how we got that buy-in. So after looking at the data, we had a conversation with our building leadership team about, okay, so what does this mean? What do we need to do? What teaching practices do we want to see so that we see growth in all of our students? And so from there, we worked on a math goal, a reading goal, which you'll get more information on in a minute, and then also a school culture goal. So we talked about that as a building leadership team, which is one member from each grade level, and then we also have some specials and some specialists as well. So from there, we talked about, okay, so we've been talking about this, we've been looking at this document, but how can we bring this to our staff in a really meaningful way? And so what we ended up doing is bringing the school improvement plan at one of our student late arrival dates. And each grade level looked at each of our SIP goals, and they looked at questions that they had, things that they were already seeing in practice, and then suggestions they had for improvement. And so what they did is they put that kind of on a big piece of butcher paper, and we did a carousel activity where then our teams could go and look at one another's plans and ideas, and from there we went and further revised the plan. And then our final step then was for each team to create a goal that they were going to work on for the year that was aligned to the SIP plan. So it really wasn't something that Jen and I, as being building leaders, were just bringing and saying, okay, this is what we're doing this year. We really took a lot of time to get to know and to understand. And as we are working this year, we want to continually come back to our school improvement plan and continue to add to it, to add more action steps, as Dr. Henderson referred to before, and revise as needed.
You'll see through our school improvement plan how we embrace the district belief that all students must learn and grow. You'll see in our goals how we accept shared responsibility for student growth, how we make decisions based on what is best for students, and how we are a future-focused community of learners. Our goals are as follows. In both literacy and math, we assert that at the end of each of the next benchmarking periods, winter and spring, all students in grades K-5 will show growth as identified by an increase in the number of students meeting their projected growth targets on MAP. And you may be surprised when you see the data, as we were very surprised when we looked at it in a trajectory. Our culture goal focuses on the sustained use of PLCs to help teachers increase their use of ongoing formative assessment data to make instructional decisions and to influence student engagement and achievement. Through our school improvement plan, we are working toward the district's student learning objectives to ensure student growth through a balanced assessment system and to increase student engagement in all grades early childhood through high school. As teachers work to implement the strategies listed in each of the Teachers Will and Students Will sections of our plan, they are not alone. Beyond the new Eureka and school-wide materials, the workshop model is also new to several of our staff members. As well, so is the idea of having students set and monitor goals for their own learning. Like students, we have teachers at various places along the continuum of knowledge and practice. We are lucky that teachers in this district are not asked to work in silos and that they are encouraged to grow professionally in learning teams and within the work they do each day in their classrooms. They have each other as professional learning communities, and they have the support of our instructional coach, Mrs. Becky D'Angelo.
Hi, my name is Becky D'Angelo, and I am the instructional coach at Lincoln School. In my role to help kind of promote and foster student growth. I work within the PLCs. The PLCs meet twice a week, and I go to the PLCs and help or facilitate the teachers' work with data. And a lot of that is just really looking at patterns and trends that we see, areas on which, that we feel like we really want to focus. And our talk when we work together is really, how can we use the workshop model? How can we use engagement strategies with children, with the students? How can we use focus and specific feedback to help move the kids along, when they set goals for themselves and the goals that we have for them as set out in our plan. Another way that I work with teachers is I work with individual coaching cycles. So I can work with teachers individually, and we can really focus in on a goal that they have as a teacher, whether it's with math, whether it's with LA, if they want to do some sort of collaborative integrated project, that we can help the kids work together. In the classroom, we can focus on a specific goal and make a plan for how that's going to work with instructional shifts, whether it's like really working hard on the workshop model, really working hard on how kids can use speaking and listening skills with math talks, to get them really thinking about how they're proceeding with their math work. So we really work together as a team. And that's really, really important, because when you work together as a team, you realize that every student in that building is your responsibility, and you're working to foster the growth of each and every student. And you're not working, as Jen said, in a silo. We're working together, and we support each other. And so I've seen this so many times, just personal levels, where a student might be a third grade student, and if they're struggling a little bit, or a teacher has a question, they have no hesitation to go to a second or first grade teacher for help and support. They really have no hesitation to really talk within their PLC and get their peers' feedback, and I can support and facilitate with that too. And so it's really, really a pleasure to have this type of a plan that's so well laid out and that we can work together to implement.
All right, so 3 times a year we meet as a data review team that includes specialists, the whole grade level team, and administrators. Can somebody do that for me? Thank you. And then what we do is we take a look at the data and we think about what this means. And as Ms. Barnaby had said, it was kind of surprising this year. And I wrote down Mary's words, confronting the brutal facts. So here are the facts of our data. Highlighted are third grade, their scores in 2015. 78% of our students met their individual MAP goal for math. When they went into fourth grade, that number dropped to 65%. And now in fifth grade, it's at 32%. So just taking a look at this data and figuring out the why to this. So what we noted is that substantially fewer and fewer students are meeting their projected growth as cohorts move up in the grade level, and this makes us question the difference between grade levels and curriculum, resources, and instructional strategies that are used in the past. We also are analyzing previous year scores and noting that the percentage of students meeting the targets are steadily declining. We're taking a look at whether student engagement is impacting this and trying to figure out how we can help build all students up. In addition, we're exploring answers to these questions on a weekly basis in our PLCs throughout the school year. So we're hoping to try to figure this out. And in addition, as Dr. Pedraza said, making sure that we're looking at Fontes and Pinnell data that we just did when we benchmarked all of our students.
So now it's down to me. I'm the teacher, and I'm the one meeting on the PLCs and the weekly with the other teachers, along with the principals will come in, or the instructional coaches, or the reading specialists. So with the information we have, which Shelley had just showed, we take that information as a grade level and other assessments we've been using throughout the weeks. We do it week by week, and with that we can look at how we're grading the material, how our children are answering the material, and within that we find the inter-rater reliability between I might grade something differently than another teacher. So with the conversation starts on how are we teaching this, why is there a gap, and where do we go from there? So we are doing that through our PLC, which is a new way for us to meet. Not that we haven't done this in the past, but now it's more focused and it's more regimented for us to get more work done in the allotted time. So we're analyzing all this, and we're using this information for our acceleration block also, which is on every day that we're getting the kids more and what they need from where they're at. The biggest thing that we have found is the discrepancies between a teacher to teacher. Somebody may see something one way or another, so within our collaboration and everybody else coming in to see what we're doing is helping us get to a true PLC and improve our school grades. An example would be on our Unit 1 pre-assessment for Module 1 Math. Based on the rubric that we all used, we found discrepancy in the test, and we found it also in our answers. So when we had started these conversations, we got a hold of Dave Beatty and talked also to him directly about how we are grading this and getting our data to make sure that we're all on the same page, because data can be different depending on the person. So as we collect the evidence from the action steps throughout the year, we look forward to increasing the engagement levels within each content area and following the growth of our students. Thank you.
So again, thank you for allowing us this opportunity to share our goals for the year with you. We look forward to growing as a team of learners through the process of increasing our student engagement and their achievement.
So just to wrap up before we open it up for questions, just as Lincoln did, you may have noticed many of our schools address culture and their culture goals through the use of PLCs. And you may think, what is the connection? And it really speaks to the nature of a PLC. In order to have a highly effective PLC, you have to have a great deal of trust among all members of the PLC. You have to be willing to be vulnerable. You heard the teachers talk about being the discrepancies between their data and between how they were assessing. So you have to have a high level of professional trust to have those philosophical discussions, have the difficult conversations. If my data looks really poor compared to my colleagues, I need to be open to hearing what they may be doing differently that I need to look at adopting. So it takes that. It also helps our teachers become owners of all the kids in their grade level and not just the ones that are in their classroom every day. And so that really does positively impact the culture of the school. So we'd be happy to take any questions, either for the overall process or for Lincoln here.
Okay, I'll just kick it off. Yeah. Well, thanks for doing this, because I know we've been working on this for a while, and this is exciting for us. I'll speak for the board. We love hearing about what's happening in the classroom, and this is the reason we're on the board. So thanks so much for doing this work. Yeah. Go ahead.
I have one question, and thank you so much for the Lincoln team coming up here, because this really helps help me understand how it works in action. Again, this is probably a little more logistical. I've got the big picture, and thank you very much, Mary, for explaining how culture and PLC tie together. But my logistical question is, this team, multifunctional, I love it. How do you find time to get together and meet? How does that work?
So that's something we budget for in learning and teaching, because, as you said, it's multi-grade level, it's across disciplines in our secondary schools, and the logistics of that is it can't take place during the school day. So it's an outside of school commitment that these members have volunteered to do, and so we compensate them for that time.
Thank you. To all of the involved.
Yes.
Thank you.
What would you say your collective single biggest challenge to being effective is?
Being effective is looking at the data and honestly and seeing where we are falling. If you saw what was up for the slide, and seeing this is shocking for us, especially after they leave the grade, to see that go down. And why is it going down? Where are the gaps, either in the assessments? Is it the MAPS testing, or is it something we're missing in our curriculum that we're not hitting? So even from this, we have to dissect that even further below to see if we're missing, if in math, if it's measurement or geometric, algebraic, And that does happen with the MAP scores. It does break it down in 4 sections for math and 4 for reading. So within that, MAPS has a great tool to see specifics for each child, and it allocates a goal for them along with steps to build that. So it's really dissecting. This is just MAPS. This isn't F&P. F&P is new this year, and next year we'll know more where we're going with that. F&P is more of a diagnostic tool for specific reading. And now with the new math with Eureka, it should be interesting to see how this differs also from MAPS. So it is really looking, again, not just at this general data, but breaking down each section. I know at one point, we were lacking skills in measurement across. So we had to go back and look where our curriculum was in measurement and why was it kept going down. So that was one way to, as a whole school, we were going down in measurement, whether it was at the end of the chapter, at the end of the unit, or at the end of the year, at the beginning of there. So breaking it down even by month, depending on what's coming up on the test also.
Now, what would you say is what's your single biggest need in order to make your group effective?
Time.
Okay.
Didn't hesitate. I know. I could have said that in unison. Right. Yeah. Well, and that's something that I really want to commend the Lincoln team for, because Lincoln's a high-performing school, as are the majority of our schools when you look at the data holistically. But what this team really did was look at groups of kids, and when they did, they saw some results they weren't expecting, but they confronted it, they're tackling it, and that just speaks volumes to their commitment to their kids and really what we can look forward to, which will be some really incredible growth from our students.
So is this helpful? Is this process what you want to do? I guess I'm going to ask that question.
It's helpful right now. I mean, as we see and as we're changing our curriculum, which has changed dramatically past 2 years over the past 10, hopefully this will increase it with the new curriculum and the new way we are teaching it with the with school-wide system, with the Eureka, and incorporating all the specialists to come in. And we're really looking forward to the acceleration block to see if that will help, because we're breaking down each kids into their different levels and going from there. And in our second grade, we have Fontes and Pinellas from an A to Z level. So A is being at the lowest and Z is the highest. Well, between the 88 kids, we have kids who are AA and kids that are Z, and they're all in between. There's, as you get in the 3rd, 4th, and 5th, they're a little higher and a little more grouped. But so breaking up that level with the F&P and the acceleration, given the time to work on those specific skills, is very helpful. So it is really finding the time to figure out the data and then seeing what we're missing in our curriculum.
Yeah,
or
so
what we have to add to it.
right, so it's the material, the curriculum, and it's also the you and your second grade group of teachers, and then first grade and third grade,
and
and
articulate through first and third to see where they're at. So it is across. You have to go through across. So we meet as a second grade level, then we'll meet in first with first grade, then we'll meet with third. So there is the articulation throughout. That's very helpful.
But that's where you hear time come in.
And language, yeah.
Yeah.
We're all in the same language. We all use the same language.
And so that's why I wanted to, ask the question, is this helpful? And it's helpful, plus we need more time.
We need more
And, okay, it's the right approach.
The other thing about when we meet in PLCs is that is that it's really helpful to have a lot of different viewpoints. So if somebody is, we're talking about an issue, a problem, or just an opportunity, you have a lot of different minds at the table. And so that is very helpful, because then you have a lot of different ideas and can problem solve. And it's kind of like what we're asking the kids to do. We want them to collaborate. We want them to work around a problem. We're doing the same thing. And so by us doing that, we can see where we want the kids to go with this, because this is really how you solve problems. And it's really how you move forward. You were going to say something,
And-
Shelley. I'm sorry.
Oh, go ahead.
And then I was just going to piggyback on that a little bit, where we've always set goals where it's like 75% of my students will meet their MAP growth by the end of 17-18. But we've never really reflected on how to get them to meet that goal. And that's why I think that if-then, that theory of action is so important, because now we're setting a goal, but we're putting action in place. It's like, if I do A, B, and C, then 1, 2, and 3 will happen. So it's just really a lot of teamwork, and you know what? If we do this, I bet we'll see this. And it seems so simple, but just something that we've overlooked in the past.
So it seems like, to summarize, it is really good method or vehicle or forum for collaboration. And I'm thinking that you probably feel more empowered of the decision making. So I even look at your culture could probably shift just by doing this.
Right.
And okay, you're all shaking your head.
You feel
because
very
I'm trying to look
yeah.
at everything
You
for
feel
you.
very
you know?
supported because it's a big job. I mean, there's a lot to do, but when you have the support of a team, it just is a very good feeling because there's always somebody there, to help you and collaborate and
Thank you very much.
Sure.
Thanks for coming. Okay, school report cards and student performance data. Mary Ann?
Hi. I'm glad to have the opportunity for my first official conversation with you, and I look forward to more. As you all well know, the vision for the district is that our students will all graduate college, career, and life ready. And so the information that I'm going to be presenting today will hopefully give you a sense of the extent to which we're actually beginning to meet that vision. So what I hope you'll walk away with is feeling like you have a good understanding of the extent to which our students are college and career ready at various points in their schooling at elementary and high school level. I'm going to be giving an overview of the data, and then Nikki Tammer is going to talk about some of the implications specifically around literacy, and Dr. Henderson will also talk about some of the other implications for instruction. So this is the list of indicators that I'll be talking about. It's a long list. I'm going to move a little bit quickly, and there will definitely be time for questions at the end. Some of the information sort of repeats, and so I'll sort of give you the high-level overview of that without walking you through each and every slide, which I hope is okay. There are a few indicators which are not on this list but actually are in the operational plan, and I'll come back to that at the end when we talk a little bit about some potential changes that we might want to think about to this list of indicators, as well as potential other indicators. All of the data that I'm going to talk about is from last year, so we're always referring back to the 16-17 school year. So we're going to start by looking at the readiness of our high school students for college and career. As you know, probably, the state changed its required assessment for grade 11 students last year from the ACT to the SAT, so we no longer have a complete set of longitudinal data for our students, and we are in essence beginning a new trend line here. So for 16-17, the average total score for students on the SAT was an 1162, and you can see the scores in each of the major subject areas. Just to give you a sense of kind of what those scores mean in terms of college entrance, the middle 50% of students at the University of Illinois at Urbana-Champaign typically get scores between 1360 and 1480. Now that's across all the different colleges, and it varies depending on which college you're trying to get into and things like that. But just to kind of give you a little bit of an external benchmark. If we look at the distribution of scores, oh, I'm sorry, this is a little bit small, isn't it? Chris Welton is going to yell at me after this because I always yell at him about his tiny little numbers on charts. So if you look at the distribution of the SAT scores of the national percentiles, what you'll notice is that we have a lot of students performing at high level. So we have about almost half of our students performing at the 80th percentile or above. But there's a long left tail. So about a fifth of our students are performing below the 50th percentile. I'm going to ask you to keep those numbers in your head because we're going to start to see a similar pattern emerge as we keep looking through the data here. So remember that 20% below kind of standard there, and about 50% or more above. If you look at the college readiness benchmarks that the College Board has set, most of our students are in fact meeting them at grade 11. The district had set its own benchmark using the ACT. This is actually not the ACT benchmark. It's a higher benchmark that I think the district had some discussion about and set in the past. And what you notice is that if you use that higher benchmark, you get a slightly smaller number of students who are meeting that benchmark. This computation here, this number that I'm showing you, this 56%, is based on an approximation of taking students' SAT scores and translating them to ACT scores. That is, as you will imagine, not a perfect process. And what I find in looking at a subset of students who have both kinds of scores is that they tend to vary between 1 and 6 points on the ACT scale. So, you know, there's some variability there. What we don't have yet for the SAT are state proficiency standards. So the state is now in the process of setting its standards for what it will say is proficiency on the SAT from the point of view of the state for, you know, federal reporting purposes. We do have some fairly substantial achievement gaps. So you'll see that for subgroups of students, on average at the subject level, you're looking at differences in average scores of about 120 points, depending on which group you're looking at. So those are not insignificant achievement gaps that we're seeing at the high school level. So if we move to outcomes to a little bit more on the process side, so that's kind of about how students are achieving, right? But what are we doing to get them ready and to prepare them for that kind of achievement? One of the metrics that has been on the list of key performance indicators for the past couple of years is the extent to which students are getting, having post-secondary types of experiences, courses that they're enrolled in. And that can be anything from an AP course to a dual credit course and so on. So what you'll see here is that the vast majority of students are having this kind of preparatory experience, that kind of coursework that should be preparing them for college or career. And that number has been kind of increasing little by little over time. So this kind of says to me we're doing a decent job of exposing students to relevant coursework. The question is, on average, over the course of their high school careers, the question is, how is that translating into achievement? If we focus specifically on AP, you'll see that about a third of students participated in at least one AP course last year, and these numbers have been fairly consistent over time. That's participation. What you'll see here is that, in fact, nearly 90% of students are scoring at least a 3 on the exams that they're taking. So if they're taking the courses, they are doing pretty well in them, and they're likely to be able to receive college credit for those courses that they are taking. Graduation rates are steady, hanging around 95%, and dipping up and down a little bit here and there. So overall, when I look at all of these data, and this is my first opportunity to look at a lot of different data for the district, what this kind of says to me, at least at the high school level, is we're doing a pretty good job of getting students into courses that may prepare them for college and career, and we're doing a good job with preparing many of our students for college. We may be doing less well preparing all of our students for college, and for those who won't attend college, preparing them for careers. So if we transition to the elementary level, I'm going to ask you to remember some of those numbers that I showed you before. So what you're seeing here is the percent of students who are proficient, or at each of the performance levels, based on the PARCC assessment, which is the state's assessment assessing college and career readiness at grades 3 through 8. So what you'll see here is that, again, roughly just over half of our students are at the met or exceeds level on the PARCC, and this is across all grade levels. And we've got those two lower performance levels hanging around 20%. I'm going to skip this slide and come back because I want to show you one other way of looking at just achievement at the elementary and middle school level. So one of the sources of data that the district has used for a long time, I think in part because of changes in state assessments and so on, has been the NWEA MAP assessment. And so this just breaks down MAP performance, again, by national percentiles. And so what you'll see here is a fairly similar pattern to what you saw on the SAT. Again, about a fifth of our students are performing below the 50th percentile, and we've got, in this case, about 68% or so kind of at the higher levels of performance there. So let me come back to this slide for a moment. One of the key performance indicators that was added, I think last year or maybe the year before, whenever changes were last discussed, was a focus in on third grade in particular and reading in particular as well. There's a good amount of research that suggests that students who are reading on grade level by third grade are really in a good position to be successful in their futures. And so this new key performance indicator was added. The data that I'm showing you here is actually from the Fontes and Pinnell assessment, which is a new assessment that we are administering for the first time this year. And it's an individual one-on-one assessment in which students are actually reading with their teachers and then answering questions. So it's a very sort of in-depth way for teachers to get a sense of students' reading capabilities. Since we don't have the data from last year, what I'm actually showing you here are the levels of performance of our incoming fourth graders for this year as a sort of proxy for third grade performance from last year. And so what you'll see again is some of those same kinds of numbers that we've been looking at. So we've got 22% of students who are below what we would expect at that grade level. We do have a lot of students who are doing really well. So again, it's that kind of bimodal situation that we have. Looking at MAP data, again, as we saw with the SAT data at the high school level, we do have some achievement gaps. They have generally increased a little bit over time at the elementary level and kind of held steady or maybe increased a little bit at the middle school level. So this is elementary reading. This is elementary math. You can see the green bars are for last year. Middle school reading. And middle school math. So, whoops. Some years ago, there was some work done to, no pun intended, map scores to ACT scores. In other words, to be able to look at a student's MAP score and project the likelihood that they would attain the district's benchmark of 23 on the ACT. So this is kind of what that trajectory looks like in terms of MAP scores. This is what it looks like when you map actual students against that trajectory in general at a sort of high level. And this is what it actually looks like for last year for fifth grade students. So if you consider this kind of group of students as your elementary cohort, this is reading. Again, what you'll notice is that about 50% of students are on track to meet what was the previous ACT benchmark of 23. For math, it hasn't quite held steady. Something changed over the years there, but again, you'll see that for 16, 17, we've kind of landed around that same number there of around 50% on track. Gets a little bit bigger at the middle school level, so this is middle school reading, so you'll see here about just over 60% of students are on track. And roughly the same for math. Another KPI is to take this same information that we were just looking at and look at a particular slice of students. So these are our ELL students who have transitioned out of bilingual programs. And there are kind of two groups of them. One group who has essentially been out of the bilingual program longer than the other group. So the former ELLs have been out of the program longer than the transition ELLs. So these next slides take the same exact data that we were looking at before and just really focus on that former ELL and transitional ELL group. So in general, fewer former ELLs and students who have recently transitioned are on track than other students. It's about half as many former ELLs are on track as non-ELLs, and about a quarter of the transitional ELLs, this is for reading. The story is similar in math, but we have somewhat more former students who are below target here for math. I'm not sure what's behind that, but that's the pattern that we're seeing. One of the other questions we might ask ourselves is, are students growing? And the measure that we have right now for this is, again, based on the NWA MAP assessment, and this is looking at fall to winter growth. So you'll see that this is the average number of points that students grow between fall and winter on the map at the elementary level for reading and for math. These numbers are fairly on par with national averages. So what we're seeing here in terms of growth is not different than what you see when you look at sort of the growth norms across the country. I think the question to ask ourselves is, students may be growing what we would expect, sort of across the country, but are the students who started maybe at a different level of performance growing enough or growing more so that they can begin to become on track if they're not on track? You'll notice the growth goes down a fair amount in terms of MAP points at the middle school level. Again, these numbers are on par with what we see at the national level, so we're not seeing different amounts of growth. Again, I think the question is, what does the growth look like for different groups of students, and are they growing enough to get on track? So there are a couple of additional, that says DPIs, and it should say KPIs, district performance indicators or key performance indicators, that we'll begin to be able to look at as new data become available. And I think some of these other ones we'll want to take a closer look at as well. So for example, right now the measure that we have of growth is only the MAP. Moving forward, we'll begin to have a measure based on the PSAT at grades 8, 9, 10, and 11, and I think that'll offer us another opportunity to look at the extent to which our students are growing at those grade levels and over a longer period of time. Fall to winter growth is a pretty short period of time, and I think having a longer period of time in which to look at growth would probably allow us to see more than what we may be seeing here. Third grade reading at grade level, as I mentioned, going forward we will have data for actual third graders and not incoming fourth graders, so that's something that you can expect moving forward. The list of KPIs that we currently have also has an indicator related to progress of ELLs, and that's intended to be based on the extent to which ELLs are progressing in their English language proficiency. That would be based on the state assessment of English language proficiency, the access assessment. That test changed as well, and so we don't have a way to measure growth right now. That's something that we can take a look at again as we move forward. On track for college and career readiness, as I mentioned, right now the MAP trajectory is tied to ACT scores. Assuming that we're going to be continuing with the SAT, it probably makes sense to recalibrate that trajectory and also be looking at PSAT links as well. So that's something that I think we'll want to take a look at. The other thing that occurs to me, just coming in new to the district, is that if one of the key questions, really the key question we're trying to answer, is to what extent are our students college and career ready at different points, then we may actually want to look at the extent to which they are successful in college as they move forward. And so there are some data that are available from the National Student Clearinghouse that we could begin to take a look at, and I think that might be something we want to do as well. We also have a new assessment of kindergartners, of their readiness, and so we could begin to be taking a look at how ready are kids when they come to us, and then as they leave us and move into post-secondary, the post-secondary world as well. I think for me, this was a really helpful way to sort of look at, all of the data that we have moving forward, I will probably want to reorganize it around, I think, what are the key questions, which are about on track, all students on track, and things like that. So right now it's a bit of a laundry list, and I didn't make a bunch of changes to it. So that's something that I think we'll want to take a closer look at going forward, along with there may be some input and kind of process measures that if we think there are important enabling factors like culture, like other things that we may want to begin to incorporate into these performance indicators as well. The state report cards, the school report cards that the state produces will be coming out at the end of October. That'll give us a good opportunity to be looking at comparison data. So right now we have our park data and everybody else has their own park data. We don't have a way, unless we call up a bunch of districts and ask them to give us their park data or their SAT data, to know kind of what those comparisons look like. So I think that'll be another thing that we want to add in sort of moving forward. It'll have to be something that's always added a little bit later based on this timeline, but once we have those report cards, we can report that back to you, and we will, of course, have to officially communicate that information to you as well. I'm going to turn it over to Nikki to talk about literacy, unless it makes sense to have questions now on this, or do you want to do them all at the end? Or if you have any questions. If you don't, then that is, of course, fine.
To have questions, do you want to have questions now for this data? Yeah, it's such a large amount of
It's a lot of charts, a lot of graphs. Yeah.
Okay, so are there questions about the KPIs? Anyone? Go ahead.
I have a comment. I really like, thank you, and I really like how you assess and how you look at things. Like, I can already tell that you're, trying to help us, I'm going to say be more focused on how do we move the dial. And so I was appreciative of, your comments throughout and the assessment, the analysis, synthesis, and assessment. And in particularly what you just said, which is how you'd like to look at it next. Instead of a laundry list, it's what are the key questions we need to be asking ourselves? So how do we move the dial? And therefore, how do we then be more focused? And then we can feed into school improvement, you know what I mean? And the classrooms, the buildings, instead, you know what I mean? And everything gets funneled and focused. So that to me was a big element that you brought to the table that's new, and I want to make sure that you know that that's a good thing. Thanks. Very helpful.
So I'll ask you a question I asked Charles Sprendel a while ago, and we didn't really have the data yet, and unfortunately then we go and change the SAT. But it revolves around how do we measure growth across, so we have 20% below the 50 percentile line. And it looks like we've got 40 to 50% above the 80th percentile line. And then we've got a bunch of people in the middle. And so how we do, when we look at student growth, we're looking at it very much in aggregate. And, I'd seen a slide several years ago when I first joined the board. I think one of the districts, I'll screw it up anyway. But they had brought in this slide, and it showed where the incoming freshmen were, and then it showed the growth between that and senior year. And they had a set of test batteries that articulated to the ACT at the time, but it was by decile on the way in. So a kid that was on track to score 19, coming through the door to us in high school, where did they end up? And so, for me, this is extremely useful. It's leaps and bounds of progress, and thank you. But ultimately, for me, the Holy Grail is kind of figuring out how to decompose this and to show that, ultimately, the question is how much value are we adding to each kid? And it's a hard question to answer, but in my mind, it starts with each kid in each decile and how much growth are we doing? Because we tend to focus on the tails, like you said, because it's bimodal, but how do we make sure that we've got all kids through that? Because those are big groups.
Yeah, I think that's a really good question, and it would be a good thing to look at is the extent to which students at different points in the distribution are moving. And we should start to have some data that will enable us to do that, since we now will have kind of that PSAT battery.
Okay, yeah, because I was just trying to figure out when. I asked Charles, and he was still working on it, and you're here, and I'm still interested in kind of, do we have better visibility into when we can start looking at that kind of data?
So this is our first year of having all the grade levels take PSAT, I believe. So by next year, we'll have at least some of, you know what I mean? So we'll have sort of, one cohort's moving along kind of worth of growth that we can take a look at.
Is it possible to do any of that for the middle school or the elementary when we're talking about map testing?
We could certainly look at the map data that we have in the same manner, if that would be
Yeah, because
of interest.
we see these achievement gaps, or we see some of these trends that are eye-opening for us, unfortunately. And in decomposing that to figure out, as you get to why, I know you've got a great staff of folks that are looking at it, but I'd just be curious from our perspective, to look over your shoulder a little bit on how do you decompose that? Where is it coming from? Is it the kids in the middle? Is it the kids, at which end? So, again, because ultimately it's how much value is our school district adding? So thanks.
Though you did a great job, I neglected to prepare you for the fact that Chris was going to ask you that question, because he has asked it every time we've had a data presentation since I've been here. So if we could find a way to get that question answered for him, I would be grateful, because I think he finally deserves an answer one of these days.
Well, in my past life, in my last job, I was the value-added lady. That's all I did. So I'm not sure we have enough data to make our own growth or value-added model, but we can certainly do something with the data that we do have.
That's the goal. I understand it.
Yeah.
I have a few short things, but I am a big believer in if you can measure it, you can improve it. So I'm grateful for the work you're doing. I'm grateful to see what's going on at Lincoln in measuring down to individual kids. Now that you've had one pass at this, and you may have already answered this question right after I wrote it down, but are we not measuring something that we should be?
So the things that occurred to me as I was looking at this kind of holistically is we've got a kind of a bunch of stuff in the middle, but what I'd like to know is, well, what actually happens to kids once they leave us? Because I think that will be illuminating for us. I think that's a data set that we haven't looked at. And where are they coming when they come to us? I think that would also be helpful in sort of framing what's happening in between.
Yeah, I agree. By the way, I don't know if we did it on an ongoing basis, but at least 1 year before Dr. Moyer's time, we did subscribe to that National Clearinghouse data. Going from memory, my memory isn't that great, but it was something like 86% of our kids returned for their sophomore year in college, which was a fair amount above the national average.
Right.
So I just think it's interesting that 50% of our kids, as we measure them, are on track, but once they get to college, 86% return, but I think that might have something to do with that bimodal fact that 80% of our kids are I'm sorry, what was the number that I wrote down?
About half of them are really performing at high levels. So
Yeah,
above the 80th
half
percentile,
are
yeah.
performing above 80% and 20% are performing below 50%. So maybe that answers that question. As you took your first pass, is there something that jumped out to you, that some single things that needs to be improved the most?
No, I mean, I think spending more time to look at where the gaps are in terms of schools, in terms of grades, in terms of starting points. Those are some of the things that I'd be interested in looking at further. And, then you'd have 100, decks, 100 slide deck rather than 50,
Well,
but yeah.
But that's, it's what, you just need to sort it out more, it sounds like. Anything that's jumped out at you that is the most important thing or things that we can be doing to move the needle?
I'm going to let Mary and Nikki talk about what we should be doing on the instructional side. Yeah.
Okay. one last. Since we have no longitudinal data, thanks to the state of Illinois,
We have longitudinal data. The problem is that it's not complete, so we don't necessarily know which students. We don't have all the data for every student, so it makes any comparisons that we would make not quite accurate.
do you see benefit to the board continuing to fund our juniors taking the ACT?
Personally, I don't. From the point of view of, are we going to get different information? The tests are highly correlated. They're correlated at like 0.89, so you're not getting different information about kids.
Okay.
The only reason, from my point of view, my personal point of view, to do it would be if that's a score that kids need for college applications, and we think as a district or a board that we want to support that, then that would be a reason. So that's my personal take.
Okay, and it certainly is a number that every college takes, right?
Usually one or the other, or both, or none in some cases.
Right, in some cases. All right, that's everything I have.
Great.
Yeah, I just had a quick question about
sorry.
National Clearinghouse, just going back a couple of years. We talked a lot about that, and our data is old because you have to look at 6 years after you graduate from high school. So we were looking at kids that graduated York 2005, 2006, 2007. So I would like to look at that again. That was really good information for us, and I don't know why we haven't been doing that like the last 2 years. So I think that'd be very helpful.
Great.
Thank you.
All right. Well, you guys stole my thunder a little bit because I worked very closely with Mary Ann, and I know how hard she's worked over the last days, nights, weekends to put this together. So I think it's really great that you recognize that, because we certainly do at the L&T team as well. Thanks for the opportunity to talk with you a little bit tonight about what we're going to actually do with the data. That's the exciting part. Looking at the data isn't so exciting for me, but I do love to talk about what we're doing with it. And so Fontes and Pinnell, you've heard that word a lot tonight. Workshop model. After I talk, you might have some questions for Mary or myself. Those have been thrown around a lot tonight, and my purpose is I have 6 slides, maybe 7. I'm not going to dig deep. Fontes and Pinnell goes so incredibly deep. We could talk for hours and hours, and I'd be happy to do that with you at another time. But tonight I just kind of wanted you to just have a little bit of an understanding about what we're doing with the data, and then you can ask me questions afterwards, of course. So the 2 main ways that we're using the data is during the literacy block, and we're using that to group for guided reading. And then we're also using it during the acceleration block, and we're also using that to tailor our instruction for the students during the acceleration block. I've never used this before. Wait, this one. This one. Perfect. Thank you. So during the literacy block, there's multiple ways that we're using the data. You can get 3 different levels on students using the Fontes and Pinnell benchmarking system. You can get their independent level, which they use during the workshop model when they're reading independently. Their instructional level is what they use when the teacher is teaching, what the teacher uses when she's teaching guided reading. And then the frustration level books are really books that we want to avoid at this time because they're too hard for the students to read, and they would be frustrated. So during guided reading, we are looking at the literacy continuum. It's a book about this thick. You have an example in your packet. I picked a level A for you, and that's the lowest level. Those are our kindergarten, early beginning readers. But I just kind of wanted you to see what it looks like, and I'll talk about it in a minute. But what I love about the literacy continuum and the Fontes and Pinnell benchmarking system is the fact that, first of all, you were able to purchase it for K-5 for about $110,000, which I think is a really good use of money. Within that kit came the literacy continuum, and the teachers are really able to use that as a foundation for setting school and district goals. It's linked to state and national standards. It helps us as administrators know where we want to go next, but it also tailors instruction for teachers and gives them key specific ideas and instructional strategies to use during guided reading and during the acceleration block with their students, and then it links those the assessment is directly linked to instruction, which goes back into that literacy continuum, which I'll talk a little bit about. Really, the literacy continuum, it's like a roadmap. When you're going on a vacation, the map tells you exactly where to go. That, in a nutshell, is what the literacy continuum is. It tells the teacher exactly what the students need to be working on, thinking about the text, so before they read, activating their prior knowledge, thinking about what they need to be thinking about within the text, their fluency, monitoring their thinking, and then going beyond the text. And that's where you really dig in deeper, and that's where that rigor comes in, with inferring, asking deep questions, making connections to another book or something that's happened in the world. And I've been, one of the great things about my job that I love is that I could get to go all the way from EC to the high school, and I get to see what's happening at the high school and how they're trying to bring reading into social studies and all the other contents, and it's really exciting stuff. You do have that example of your literacy continuum, and when you get up to the higher levels, and that was a mistake that I made, I'm sorry about that, I should have copied one of the higher levels for you, because it's color-coded by the 3 colors. So the pinkish level, if you will, is thinking about the text and before they read, and that's identified in the document for the teachers. Then you go into the blue area, which is thinking within the text, and it gives teachers, again, specific things to focus on during that time, and then how to get kids to think beyond the text. And again, it's color-coded for the teachers, which is really great and very helpful. And then also, we use it not only during guided reading, but during acceleration. And one of the things that, Mary really wanted me to point out, and she's absolutely right, is that the acceleration time is an extension of our core reading time. It's not something outside of or a standalone program. And that's something we're really trying to, talk with our teachers about as well, because as they implement the acceleration block, I think it's causing a little bit of stress because they haven't quite made that connection yet. And really, we're trying to focus on whatever the standard is that we're looking at during shared reading or during the workshop model. We want the teachers to be then focusing on during guided reading, but then that also goes into the acceleration time, so it's all interconnected. Just to drill it down a little bit, if we're talking about main idea and the difference between main idea and theme during shared reading, then we scaffold that for the students and we talk about it at their instructional level during guided reading. Well, then that's what we're doing during the acceleration block as well, so that it all ties together and it's not separate pieces and kids don't know, what am I doing during acceleration? What am I talking about during guided reading? What am I looking for when I'm reading independently? What's the teacher talking about during shared reading? We're trying to make it all interconnected. And it's not yet, but that's where we're headed, and that's what we're trying to do. We utilize you've heard PLC a lot tonight. Professional learning communities, that's that collaboration time where teachers have an opportunity to meet together and to talk about data, to talk about how students are doing, to talk about how students aren't doing and what we want them to be doing, and how we as educators can all work together to make that happen and to make that successful for students in guided reading during the acceleration time, and how we can make it interconnected so that it doesn't feel so separate. We group students according to their needs, so when we say acceleration time, if we have a student who's struggling, they get what they need. If we have a student who's on level, they get what they need. And if we have a student who needs enrichment, they get what they need. And that's what's so wonderful about acceleration. And we're tying instruction during, as I said, during acceleration time to the skills that are taught during the literacy block. I can't stress that enough. And that fun picture down below, I tweeted that out for those. If you're not following, I don't think you guys are following me. You need to start following me. But if you are following me, that is a second grade group at Emerson. And those second graders were talking about what a protagonist is. And so that was the high level group. But then when I went to the on level or then the lower group, they were still talking about character traits and characters in a story. They were just using different language that students were ready for at that level. So that was an exciting moment. It was fun to see that lesson. Mary, do you have anything you want to add?
No, I think I tackle acceleration a little bit in my slides, so go ahead.
Oh, you have slides.
I do have slides. Oh, you're at the end. Okay. Great. So Nikki's talked a lot about how we support our kids in literacy at K-5. So supporting students in grades 6 through 8, you've heard us again start talking last March about acceleration. So that time during 6 through 8, which is daily, 30 minutes a day, that is an opportunity for our kids to get support in the middle school in both reading and math, provided by content specialists. So that means our reading specialists are providing that reading intervention during acceleration, and math content teachers are providing the math intervention. Students who are more than 2 grade levels below, so students who have some significant reading need, they have, instead of just getting support during the acceleration time, instead they are currently taking a reading strategies class in lieu of a world language. And then students who are below grade level, whether it's half a year, 2 years, they may also be placed in a class that's co-taught. So at ELA, it would be taught by an ELA teacher and a reading specialist. For some students, it might be an ELA teacher and an EL teacher, or an ELA teacher and a special education teacher. So it's the general education curriculum, but with the supports built in through a teacher with a specialization. And that happens in both reading and in math. So at the high school, academic literacy is a reading support for students who are not on track to hit that ACT, what's previously been the ACT score. What we are finding is that students are placed in that at the end of 8th grade, so they begin their freshman year. The majority of students who take that academic literacy class are able to graduate, who are no longer in need of that support by the end of their freshman year. Students in the high school also may be placed in co-taught classes in reading and math, and the focus is on the reason we're moving to that co-taught model is to ensure that all of our students, if they have special education needs, second language needs, whatever the need may be, we want to ensure that they're getting that high level, rigorous, grade level instruction so that they're able to push through and move beyond lower level classes, which historically is how schools have supported them. By keeping them in classes where the content may have been taught more slowly, which means they don't get through all the content. It might be watered down, so it's not the level of rigor or up to grade level standards. So by focusing on a co-taught model, we're able to keep the kids in rigorous grade level content. Okay. Marianne, did you have?
And there's a lot more charts if you want to.
Okay. So one question you might have, you heard Nikki talk about acceleration for literacy support for our elementary school. And at this time this year, our acceleration is just for literacy. With Eureka Math and having 60 minutes for math, our teachers should be able to do the differentiation they needed. However, we do have one school piloting, which is Elmhurst. They are piloting an additional, different model of support where, like the literacy acceleration time, Dr. Thompson has her schedule structured so that for a portion of each grade level's math block, they're able to flood that grade level with additional supports, our special education teachers, our EL teachers, other specialists who can then be in those math classes and provide smaller groups, language supports, whatever the support may be needed. So we're excited to see the results of that pilot to see if that's something we want to expand to all of our schools. Any questions? Yes.
With the new acceleration period, do you expect to reduce the number of kids that, once they get to high school, are in the academic literacy?
That would definitely be one goal, and one way we'll measure how effective we've been. In my experience as an elementary principal, we were able to couple, not to throw in a plug, but I'm going to, we were able to couple acceleration with all-day kindergarten. And when we were able to do both of those, the number of elementary students needing intervention in reading or in math dropped significantly, which then translates to middle school and high school. But yes, with this targeted support for literacy and math that begins in elementary and carries through middle school, that would be our goal, would be to decrease those numbers.
That would be some interesting longitudinal
Yes.
data to be reported every year.
It is, because even at a glance, Dave Beatty and I were looking at some math data, and as you know, currently at the high school we have a tremendous amount of levels of math, and kids kind of get stuck in a track and aren't able to get out to push themselves up. And we, Dave and I, were looking at drilling it down to the individual student level and following their trajectory from as far back as 6th grade through high school, and it's disappointing. We don't see the kids progressing and making the growth that we want them to. So it's right now the story has been once they get stuck in a lower track, they stay there, and that's what we're trying to reverse. Because we have to, we just have to. If we mean all means all, then we have to bust that.
So why does that happen, and what can we do to change that?
Well, so that's what we're on to. That's what we're working at doing by having those co-taught classes and ensuring that the kids get grade level content, grade level standards. That's how you start to break it through. What has kept them in those tracks is because, as you say, okay, they're going to be in an Algebra A class, or we're going to be in a class with only second language students, for example, or only special education students. What happens is the expectations get lowered. And it's not always intentional, but we may reinforce rather than challenge. We may water down the curriculum rather than continuing to push. And that's not just here. That happens all over the country. But a way to break that cycle is to ensure that kids are in grade level content classes.
In that specific example, isn't that just the high school meeting kids where they are, where they're delivered into the high school freshman year?
Where the problem is that you're taking kids who are a wide range of average, okay, and then slicing them into very discrete slices that they shouldn't be, and then not giving them the knowledge and content that they need to move forward and challenge themselves. I may have landed in a lower level class, but as I begin to gain skill, and I may have a real passion for math, and I want to push myself, but particularly in math where there's a sequence of skills and knowledge that you need to get, kids get stuck and they're not able to get out. And that we know is not how kids learn, because with a growth mindset, kids do have the ability to grow and improve, but we're trapping them in low levels.
How do you balance stuck versus overwhelmed?
That's a balance. And so just putting them in a grade level content class without any supports would leave them overwhelmed. But by bringing in an EL specialist for our EL students, or a special education teacher for students who have an IEP, that's where they should be. So you would have a class of 28 kids, but 2 teachers. And so they are able then to support students who might have a different type of need in there to prevent that overwhelmed feeling.
But then I'm going to ask beyond that. All right. So what about the B student that could be an A student? So, I mean, we do bring in a lot of help for the bottom 20%. Yes. But, I mean, again, I get back to my question before. If we get an average kid, are we turning out an average kid? Are we adding value to that average kid? And what support mechanisms do we have there, or do they get lost because of that? And where the culture is, what's wrong with a B, which I've had said to me in my parent-teacher conferences before, and I hope I never hear again. But how do we perform that, or how do we provide that support mechanism for that high C, low B kid that may be capable of A, so they don't get lost.
Right. And so that's something we began tackling at the high school last year, and really working particularly with our 8th grader, our incoming freshmen, our freshmen for this year. So there was somewhat of the traditional placement for freshman English, whether you landed in honors or regular English, which is college prep. And for students so kids in the middle, the B student, who landed in a traditional college prep on-level course, but who really wanted to challenge themselves, that access was opened up for them. So they were allowed to opt in to the higher level course.
But to Jim's point, I've seen this happen, they get overwhelmed. And what support do we have for those kids when they want to push themselves into that to help them succeed at that level?
So they have writing labs and tutoring centers, and so when they want to opt into that and challenge themselves, the department head meets with the child, with the student, sometimes with their parents as well, to talk through what supports are available, how they can get additional help. So those supports are there, but it's not quite as, it's not a co-taught class, so it's not right there in the classroom. Kids will have to avail themselves of that.
But then I'd ask you the integration back with the role of the counselor in that case.
Yeah.
And keeping an eye on the kids and making sure they're doing okay and making sure that, because I know that they're given a lot of opportunity. There is a lot of opportunity there. My issue isn't that there isn't opportunity to support them. It's helping make sure that they go get that support and don't feel overwhelmed. And so how do we make sure the culture in the counseling department is such that it supports those kids that are stretching?
Can I jump in?
Of course.
We're talking about a lot of things now that happen outside of class. You know, we're talking about going to the math lab. We're talking about, you know, what happens with the counselor. And I would suggest that a lot of what you're talking about is about the mindset and changing the norm about the way people think about this. The significant amount of leveling in math in particular, in my opinion, makes it easier to teach because you're segmenting kids into smaller sections. But if you take a look at why our kids are overwhelmed, that's a really complex question. And so we're taking a look at a lot of different things, like homework, like other different types of things that go on here in the instructional approach that actually happens in the class with the regular classroom teacher, as opposed to thinking that all of these fixes are kids go somewhere else to kind of get straightened out type of a thing. So I think it's a little bit more complex than it's not that everything that people have said about this topic isn't part of the conversation. It's just a very complex topic. And when we structure it the way we've structured it, the trickle-down effect actually we've noticed is going all the way down into the elementary level, sometimes as low as 3rd grade, in terms of the effect of leveling the curriculum to that extent. And then they just get stuck. And so a lot of it even happens before they get to the high school. So when Nikki was talking about reading literacy, we were talking about all-day kindergarten. If you look at the brain research, there are a couple things that the early childhood piece in the early elementary age is critical. The next best place to catch kids up is when they start growing again in middle school with their brain development. And that's why the acceleration piece is so critical at all of those grade levels. So we're looking at all of these issues from a variety of different, it's not like there's going to be like one fix out there and we're going to find it. It's really a multifaceted thing.
Well, I thank you, though, Mary, for looking at it instead of, like Dave was saying, you know, we got to a place in math anyway that we were segmenting. And I like the fact that what you're saying is we have to get the kids back grouped together because they even help themselves. I mean, how many board meetings have we had where the buildings and teachers are talking about what the students are doing, where they're helping each other.
Yeah.
And that's what happens. I mean, you know, my 25 and 23-year-old, I'm sorry, I'm going to talk about it because my son suggested my daughter to go into a higher level English because, you know, she would help others and they would help her.
Right.
And they're at different levels. You know, she was always pulled out, you know, for additional help, but go into the honors English. And they helped each other out instead of continuing to segment.
Yes. Yes.
And then to your point is you get stuck there, or what Dave was saying is it kind of snowballed throughout. Right. And so I like this trend of going back to, you know, where we're putting students in a class, and we're finding out, where they are, meeting them where they are, what do they need, and we put in supports and we pair them with other students and.
Right. I think we could all agree that where you place in third grade should not determine your path senior year. It just shouldn't.
And also, I think it's important to say, this isn't either or. I mean, the top kids are still going to have all kinds of opportunities and be challenged. It's just about making sure that every kid has that opportunity to be pushed up.
That we don't stop them.
Yes, absolutely.
Yeah. So one of the things when I'm listening, I'm trying to take in all of this information. What I'm getting is, yes, we need to meet kids where they are, but I'm also tying it back to a point that Chris brought up on talking about growth. Mm-hmm. So while we do have to meet them where they are, we also want to see that they are growing, that they're not capped for any type of institutional type reasons.
Right.
So that we want to ensure each child is growing at their potential.
Right. And I think that's why, if you think back to that data Lincoln looked at, I think that's what was so disheartening for them, is to think when only 32% of the grade met their growth targets, that goes across all levels of performances. That's not just kids who are struggling, that's not just kids who are at the top, that's across all levels, because 68% did not make that target. Jeff?
When we talk about moving between levels, I think that is an excellent use for summer school as well. And I know particularly at the high school level, we don't run some summer school classes because there's not enough enrollment, and we find it to be uneconomical, which our job is to balance the budget, and I get that.
Of course.
But it's a disservice to kids. Can we spend some time perhaps teaming up with other schools in the area that I have to believe have the same challenge that we do in filling some of these summer school, and maybe team up, and between 2 or 3 high schools, we would have enough kids to fill a class?
Yeah, I don't know that that's anything that's been explored before, but I think Dr. Cohen and I both believe that there's a wealth of opportunity to examine our summer school programming to see what we might be able to do.
Thank you.
Mm-hmm.
How do you, in the subgroups, the achievement gaps are quite large, getting larger, and a lot of kids also aren't reading on grade level. So how do you, using acceleration time as part of your intervention to help both of those, how do you intend to see if that's working or analyze?
So Fontes and Pinnell is an assessment, because we're looking at elementary at literacy. Fontes and Pinnell is given 3 times per year. So it will be administered again right before winter break. So we'll be able to see the progress, and then again in the spring, as well as doing map testing again throughout the year for grades 2 through 5. I am highly confident. I've seen this in action, so I am so very confident that we're going to see much better growth because of the information that the teachers now have in their hands. They are able to so much more effectively target that instruction to, if I am an e-reader, the teacher now knows, here's what I'm competent in, and here's where you need to stretch me so that I grow. Where before, a lot of the instruction was whole group, so really targeted toward the middle. And so this really gets down to each child's needs. Yeah. Okay, thanks.
Okay, go ahead. Annual goals?
Okay, yeah, and the reason you didn't see any comparison information with our comparator groups with the park testing is because we don't have it from the state yet. We don't have all that, but you saw our stuff. As far as the action item, it's the approval of my goals, and so the rationale is self-explanatory. These are the annual goals. We discussed them, and so they're on the agenda tonight for approval, and they are directly related to the overarching organizational goals that the board talked about last fall.
Is there a motion?
I'll move that the Board of Education approve the superintendent's annual goals for the 2017-2018 school year.
Okay, second? Okay, moved by John, second by Chris. Any discussion about the goals? Go ahead.
Yeah, I think we need to explain to people how this fits in with the superintendent's contract. How there are some there are basically goals centered around 4 principal concepts in the contract that do not change. What are they? Student achievement, district culture, finance, and district management, and those things don't change. And what we wanted, or what this contract is intended to do, is to add things that are a little bit more responsive to what happens to be happening at that time. And so these 2 additional goals are called out. There's a process for coming to agreement with the superintendent what they are. That's happened in closed session through deep discussions. We did it again last year, and those things become a source for something to evaluate things that are a little more, shall we say, detailed, a little bit more responsive to the things that are happening at the district now. And we think this is a better model for the contract, and this is the result of that process to create those other 2 goals. Being very ambiguous about this, I'm sorry I wasn't prepared to make this statement. But I thought some explanation to folks what we're doing and how we're working to supervise our employee, our one employee, the superintendent, the CEO. I thought people should know that.
And just to clarify, the contract goals are multi-year goals that you can't accomplish in 1 year, and here we have yearly goals that will be accomplished this school year. Any other discussion? Okay, then we'll do a voice vote. All in favor of the motion, say aye. Aye. All opposed? Okay, that motion passes.
Okay, superintendent's communication. We had 22 National Merit Commended students this year. That's out of 34,000 nationwide in the National Merit Program. Commended students are the students that place in the top 5% of test takers. 9 of those students were named National Merit semifinalists. That's out of 16,000 nationally. Those students were Hannah Cronin, Matthew Dardick, Lene Dirkscheide, Courtney Jopes, Karina Kanzler, Luke Rosmus, Anshel Shah, Catherine Tomaska, and Christopher Zybert. They are competing for National Merit Scholarship recognition. The top 7,500 in the nation receive that. About 90% of the semifinalists are expected to become a finalist. And so when we find out which students make it, they will be brought back to the board in the spring and recognized publicly. The fall is when the IASA and LUDA conferences are, so Illinois Association of School Administrators and Large Unit District Association. As we've said before, we presented at these. I gave you a little bit of a synopsis of some of the things that went on, very high-level synopsis. But I think that a couple of the things, we're looking at a $13 billion cut in funding federally. So there was a representative from the AASA who works in Washington and gave us a synopsis of what's going on there. And Sarah Shaw of the ISBE discussed the new ESSA accountability requirements. ESSA is the law that replaced No Child Left Behind. Her goal is to try to find a way to link the funding and the achievement initiatives at the state level strategically so that, we currently have so many different agencies and so many different funding streams and all those kinds of things. A lot of times, as you know, things don't necessarily make sense in Springfield. What I consider to be unfortunate about the Illinois plan that it submitted to the feds for approval is that it was still really heavily reliant on the one standardized test score. Even though they brought other components into it, I don't think that Illinois took as much advantage as I would have liked to have seen in the flexibility it was allotted when it had the chance. As it relates to Senate Bill 1947, which is the evidence-based funding, we're told to expect a lot of trailer legislation and additional tweaking of the model over the next couple of years. There's some language in the laws that are still somewhat ambiguous, some interpretation of various components of distributing funds and other things like that. So there'll be additional things going on with that. That's not over yet. And then the last item on my report is related to concerns that were expressed at the last board meeting at Fisher, namely in two areas. One, a crossing guard at the intersection of Wilson Street and Victory Parkway, and another regarding the condition of the playground at Fisher. So I received some concerns about the condition of the playground. We have been looking into some options for finding ways to make some improvements out there. So we're looking at some interagency cooperation and some other private sources to try to see if we can identify some funds that we can put into the playground. We have a city school parks meeting coming up on November 6th. I intend to bring this up at that meeting and kind of pending where that goes, try to see what our options are there. I did call Jim Grabowski, who's the city manager, to try to get his take on the crossing guard situation. They're doing a study, traffic study out there, and I followed up with him this morning at a different meeting that we were at and asked him when I could expect some of that information, and he indicated he would follow up and get back with me and let me know. And so when we, again, get the information of where the city is at on that particular issue, we will put some plans in place and try to bring some ideas forward about what might be possible there. As it relates to some of the concerns that came up regarding equity, and I think most of that was associated with the playground concerns, and then branched out into some other areas of concern with just other programming and opportunities for students. When we have donations that come to us, if they are designated specifically for certain schools, we are very sensitive about trying to make sure that other schools in the district, including Fisher, have the same opportunities available for students. And so whether it's been recently with learning and teaching and its allocation for leveled readers at Fisher and the foundation grant that we received and our other internal funding sources, or whether it's been different technology resources over the years, when it comes to the academic programming and when it comes to the instruction and technology and all those kinds of things related to the classroom, we have taken great steps to try to make sure that there is equity in that programming. When it comes to a lot of the outside donations, I believe things like when people started donating the new types of water coolers where they could fill up their water bottles and all that kind of stuff, we made sure that Fisher had those types of things. And I can't say that people can't point to specific examples where things aren't exactly the same at every school, but I think, we've got temperature control issues at Lincoln. We've got other playgrounds that don't have the new modern surface like some of the ones that were recently raised. And so it's a difficult balancing act for us as an administration to address these issues when we have these funds coming in from outside sources, but we are very sensitive to it. We do our best. And in many cases throughout the years and also far predating me, we have taken those issues into concern with our budgeting and resource allocation practices. And so we will continue to do that. And as it relates to the two specific issues, I will try to get some resolution to those as soon as I can. I'm working with some outside entities, and so I don't have complete control over when or how, but we will address them.
Other comments from the board? Margaret?
Yep. First off, I want to thank, this is not a simple process. This is not a simple topic. So I want to thank the parents who have come and brought these issues. And I would say, continue to come and listen to what we're saying. And there's also the opportunity, if you have specific questions before meetings, you can write to the board and ask the questions before the meeting. So the meeting is not the only opportunity, but we welcome people who come to the meeting and express concerns. That's how we get our information. I also want to recognize the administration who is working to balance this very difficult issue, which the challenge is this is not a new issue. In trying to make all of the schools balanced. This is not a new issue. We continue to work on it. It doesn't mean it's going to be fixed immediately, but we will continue to work on it as different issues come up. We'll try to address that specific issue, and new ones might come up. But that is something that we as a board are committed to working on across all the schools. It's something that we as the administration, and I know all the teachers, are trying to work on there. And so we hear different responses from different groups who bring out these points. But we'll continue to work on it. It won't be fixed tomorrow. It might not even be fixed by the end of the school year because new issues will come up. But we are working on it. And I say continue to give us the feedback. Give us feedback, invite us. If there was a response where someone feels like we didn't participate, then send an individual note. We all have very difficult schedules, I'm sure as everyone else does, but we try to come to events as possible. So that's the invitation that's out to all of the schools, not just any particular school. That's the invitation that's out to all of the schools. Invite us and ask us what those questions are that you have, so we can have a dialogue, because that's what it's about, a dialogue on what we can do.
Very sensitive to this. On Thursday night, we're going to have the policy committee look at the gifts to the district policy 880. And every single donation that the district accepts, it always says, each and every one says in accordance with 880. And 880 says that the gifts are accepted provided they can be used in a manner compatible with the board's education objectives and policies, and permits the district to work toward resource equity among its learning centers. It's already written in there, and I can understand you're saying that perhaps in some results it's not getting there. But what we'd like to do is work as partners in making that happen, because it's written into policy. Policy is the way we talk goals and values, and it's written there already. And what you're saying probably is that need to revisit and see that. But we'll talk policy, and we'll talk, what's happening on Thursday. From the perspective of this one particular policy, which relates to gifts to the district. But what's built into all the policies is an issue that any kid in a District 205 school, regardless of what building they're going to, the intention is to get that kids the resources that are necessary to meet them wherever they are. And I know there was some of the criticism of the superintendent's response about how there are efforts to do that. And I understand that, but we'd like to work with people in a hopefully non-adversarial way to solve the problems that are still there. Let me just ask, do we have a safety problem with no crossing guard at that corner?
Well, when I heard that there was a concern in August about the playground, I went out there. Chris has been out there. Same thing with the crossing guard situation. Dr. Cohen was out there. Chris was out there observing. And so when we get these concerns from Fisher or any school, we try to analyze what's going on. I think it's best to take a look at the report that comes from the city. But I think that what I had heard, and to answer your question, is that that particular intersection is not a lot different than a lot of other intersections at all of our attendance centers where there is not a crossing guard stationed. So, I don't know what the city's going to say, when we ask them to say, whether or not they think a crossing guard should be there.
Are there crossing guards on Grand Avenue? Do we know? I mean, I didn't send these questions ahead of time. I'm just wondering. I'm trying to compare apples to apples here. We don't know about that. I think one thing that probably we're hearing is people expressing to us there's a perceived safety disparity, and I think we need to answer that quickly, because if it is safety, it doesn't have time. We got a little more time to look at the playground, a little more time to find solutions there. But if they're expressing a safety disparity, I think we need to answer that question as soon as possible. And I know we're waiting for the city to do that, but I think the city, the request with the city is also to tell us if they can contribute towards that. Is that intersection in unincorporated I mean, the one they bring up, there's no crossing guard there. Do you know why that's being brought up as an example of inconsistent safety standards among the schools?
Because I think that the parents of the students out there would like that.
I was going to say something else, but I'll just keep this one and then I'll go back to it. I'm a school liaison for Jackson. Went to the PTA meeting a couple weeks ago, and the PTA president was asking for parent volunteers because Jackson School, there's a lot more traffic than there used to be, and there's a lot more safety concerns. And I watched York, the 6 years I was there, and the schools, it is more and more of I think, a safety hazard because there's more vehicles. There's a lot more traffic around all of our schools. And that's a fact. So, I don't want to muddy the water, but I also want to throw that data out there. And not to minimize the concern that the parents brought up at that one school. So don't misunderstand what I'm saying. I just think, we've had more people that we have to employ and ask for volunteers, even at York. There's a new person, as I'm driving by in the morning, that has to monitor the traffic at York, coming out of York onto whatever it is, the street that goes out to St. Charles Road. So I think there is a bigger picture as well as this specific example. So I would, if we're looking at it, we have to be looking at it bigger picture as well as this specific example. The piece, thank you, Margaret, for thanking people. I also wanted to make sure that we thank the foundation for helping. In the past, we have talked about, and we actually changed the policy 880 for equity. And I wanted to thank some of the schools. For example, a couple years ago, probably 3 now, that I was a school liaison for Fisher, and Edison actually partnered with Fisher and helped and did a lot of their donations that were working for not just Edison, but for Fisher. And they did programs where the kids worked together. And so I want to acknowledge that beautiful thing that we're doing here in this district as well. And once again, not to minimize it, but also to thank that, people are working on, resolving this. This just happens to be, something that's come up that, we weren't aware of at this extent.
So I already asked you, Chris, but could you just, I asked if we have a plan to redo playgrounds for anyone.
From a financial standpoint, we're in maintenance mode. We maintain, we repair, the park district reviews all our playgrounds every year for safety. But we do not have a plan to upgrade all of our playgrounds. That's not a high priority for the school district right now. With our deficit budget and our finances, the playgrounds aren't a priority. We check them, we make sure they're safe, we repair them if there's something wrong, but we don't have a plan to upgrade all of the playgrounds. We talked about the Madison IGA this year, so they have a brand new playground that was put in for over $140,000 at Madison this year, but that was part of the IGA. But the intergovernmental agreement, so the city is reimbursing us $140,000 for the Madison playground. Jefferson PTA put in some new equipment there, but they don't have the soft surface. They have just wood chips, and they got a top layer of wood chips this week the same way that Fisher did. There's the soft surface the turf at Jackson that the PTA put in. And then field also has, years ago, put in a flat surface and a new playground. But you know, I did go out to Fisher last week. I looked at their playground. The equipment looks to be in good shape just from my, you know, I'm not an expert in playgrounds, but just looking around, the kids were having a good time. It didn't, you know, nothing caught my eye as in disrepair or anything like that, but the park district reviews that every year. Their experts in playground come out and check for safety.
So from a playground perspective, we don't have a program in place that assures absolute parity. But from a building improvement standpoint, from a tech standpoint, from instructional facilities standpoint, we don't accept any disparity in the improvements between our schools, do we? I'm sorry, any substantial one. As you said, Dave, you can always find those few examples where it goes one way and it actually, there are a few, you know, there are some that cut the other way.
Right. Well, what I mean by that is that, you know, some schools have better gyms, some schools have better libraries, some schools have different issues. So we'll never be able to say that every school is 100%, you know, the same. But in terms of the question you asked with equity concerns related to the instructional program, we go to great lengths to make sure that all of the students at all of our attendance sites have access to those same types of opportunities. So, you know, Dave Smith gave me some tech examples, Mary gave me some instructional examples, but those are just small examples to illustrate a point. You know, big picture-wise, over the years, we've been sensitive to that. So there are not inequities. You know, 3 of our schools got a model school classroom in the district. Fisher was one, Lincoln was one, and Bryan was one. Those were selected for different reasons, but you know, not every school has those. So it's.
I think the words that I used were substantial parity in educational facilities, as a primary focus. Yes, there are not inequities at the schools. So when you say substantial inequities or whatever term you're using, your original question about the access to the educational programming, the access to the curriculum, the instructional supports, all of those types of things, we ensure that students at all of our schools have those same opportunities. Thank you.
Okay, thanks. Moving to board communications, are there updates from board members? Okay, you, Margaret? Kara?
So Friday, I went to the ONCC meeting, the O'Hare Noise Compatibility Commission, and District 205 was approved to be on the committee, so we are now sitting member of that committee. I'm working with Alderman Dunn. He's going to give a detailed report at their city council meeting, but I'll be at the next November meeting, and we're going to try to go to the ad hoc committee because this is when the decisions are being made. So we're trying to show up and to be present. So I think, I don't know, any questions you can ask me, but that's really the update, and I'll give you another update in November.
Anything else? Excuse me. We have a few upcoming meetings. Thursday, as John said, is a policy committee meeting at 6 o'clock here at the district office, room 217. Tuesday, October 24th, Board of Education meeting, 7:30. And Tuesday, November 14th, Board of Education meeting, 7:30. So we've reached the end of the agenda. I'll declare the meeting adjourned. Thank you.